Recording.
Yeah, I think we can go ahead and get started. And as more people join, we will note them in the roll if they join after roll call.
Okay, great. Okay, well, thanks so much, Courtney, Roberta, Allison, my whole team, um, for helping us set this meeting up, and Johnny Abad on my team too. Welcome to the February 11th Colorado Forest Health Advisory quarterly meeting. Really glad to see you all virtually. I know how busy you all are, so really grateful for your participation in this really important task force that we have. Um, Before we jump into all the different items in the agenda, I want to make sure we know who's here. And so let me go through the roll call. I see Christina Burry. Are you representing Matt today?
It's just for the beginning portion of the meeting. He will be joining later.
Okay, great. Good to see you.
Thanks.
Mike Morgan, or I think I saw Vaughn here maybe.
Yeah, good morning, Dan. Mike's in meetings on the East Coast, so I'll represent him as much as I'm able this morning, though I do have a few other meetings.
Great. Thanks for joining us, Vaughn. Troy Hythector from the U.S. Forest Service, or some other folks from the U.S. Forest Service.
Good morning, Dan. This is Todd Neal.
Oh,
I'll be
Todd.
representing Troy today.
Great. Thanks for joining us, Todd.
Thank you.
Okay, John Ring.
Yep, present.
Hey, there we go, John. Good to see you. Frank Falzone.
Morning, everyone. Present.
Great. Good to see you, Frank. Samantha Albert. I think I saw Samantha. There we go. Hey, Samantha. Commissioner Abe Layden. He may be able to join us later, hopefully. Commissioner Jody Shattuck McNally. Good to see you, Jody.
Good morning, President.
Okay. Commissioner Nina Waters. I think she's here too.
Hi, good morning. I'm present. I am on my way out of a trip, so I won't be on video for most of the call, but happy to be
Okay.
here.
How do you go into? I'm kind of envious. That'd be fun.
I just left the Opus Hut, and don't be so envious. The snow was god awful.
Yeah, I hear
The
you.
touring was beautiful. The skiing was subpar.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, Commissioner Medina, is Veronica here?
Present.
Okay, good. Okay, Katie McGrath Novak. I think, hey, Katie, good to see you.
Hello.
Eric Toman. Is Eric here? Okay, he may be able to join us later. Brett Wolk. Okay. Madeline McDonald. Okay, I see Amy Moyer. Good to see you, Amy. Good to see you at Water Congress too. Mark Morgan. Good to see you, Mark. Paige Lewis. Okay. Lynn Elliott.
Good
I'm sure.
morning,
Oh, there we go,
President
Lynn.
Director. I will need to pop off at 1:15 to run a call today at 1:30, but I'm available until then. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining us when you can. Julie Stencil. Oh, and I see Paige now with us. Thanks, Paige. Is Julie with us? Until now. Pat Dorsey. You see Pat in here? Should be able to join later. Skylar McKinley. I know Skylar's really busy at the Capitol. I see him when I'm over there. And Lisa Cutter. I know that Senator Cutter is, I'm sure, busy at the Capitol. And Larry Don Sukla, I'm sure, is also really busy at the Capitol too. So I counted a quorum, I think, Courtney and Roberta. Yeah. Okay, great. Courtney, yeah.
Yes, I also just want to note for the record that Julie Stinsel is here. She's kind of stuck in the attendee room, and we're working to get her promoted, but she's also with us.
Okay, awesome. Great. Okay, next up, we need to approve the October 29th, 2025 meeting summary that was sent out. Do we have a motion for approval of that? Commissioner
I'll make
Shattuck
that.
Daly?
I'll also move, Mr. Chair.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have a motion to move that. Do we have a second? Okay. Okay, great. Mark Morgan seconding it. Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
I
Any opposition, say no or nay. Okay, the ayes carry it. Okay, first up, on the agenda, we have, federal policy update. We're really happy to have, Riley Scott with us from the Office of Congressman Jeff Hurd, who will join us today to update us on, everything going on at the federal level. So Riley, thanks so much again for joining us, and hopefully we can unmute you, or maybe you just did that. So the floor is yours for any
All right.
federal updates.
Thank you so much, Director Gibbs. Good to see all of you today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Riley Scott, and I am Congressman Hurd's Deputy District Director. I am based in our Grand Junction office, but as many of you know, our congressional district is very large. It's the 13th largest in the country. We have offices here in Grand Junction, down in Durango, and then over in Pueblo, as well as our DC office. Congressman Hurd sits on 3 different committees, first being the House Natural Resources Committee, the next being Transportation and Infrastructure, and the final one being Science, Space, and Technology. And forestry and forest policy is definitely one of the big items that Congressman Hurd has been focusing on in his first year in office. He also wanted to note that he's the chairman of the Indian and Insular Affairs Subcommittee, which is within the House Natural Resources Committee. So that oversees all of our tribes here in the US, but also our insular territories. So that's like Guam and Puerto Rico. So he's really enjoyed getting to work with those folks, and especially because we have the 2 federally recognized tribes that are in Colorado are also within our district down in the southwest corner. So we've been working with them a lot, and also working with them on forestry issues. Also within the district, we have 7 national forests and also the Comanche grasslands a little bit over on the southeastern side of the district. So definitely interface a lot with Forest Service and BLM on a lot of federal land management issues. Really quick, I just want to go through a couple of wins that the congressman has had that are somewhat related to forestry, but he did have a bill signed into law. That was the Wetlands Conservation and Access Improvement Act that reauthorizes a wetlands conservation program. This was a bipartisan bill, and we were able to get that fully signed into law in the fall. We've also had 3 different bills that have passed the House. One being the Snow Water Supply Forecasting Reauthorization Act. That's a bipartisan bill with Congressman Neguse that reauthorizes some new advanced technologies to better measure our snowpack in the mountains, and then better be able to predict what that's going to come down looking like in spring runoff. So that reauthorizes the program for another couple of years, as well as increases and adds some new technologies that have been coming out. So that is obviously very important for water, forest health, all of that within our landscape here in Colorado and throughout the rest of the West. We've also passed another bill that reduces some red tape with U.S. Army Corps of Engineers on jurisdictional back determination. That's Section 404 of Clean Water Permits, but we got that passed through the House, but it's still awaiting consideration in the Senate. Also related to Forest Service, we just had a hearing yesterday on the Crystal Reservoir Conveyance Act. That is some property just south of Ouray I think that's in the Gmug Forest, but that would transfer ownership or convey the land of that reservoir and dam from the Forest Service to the city of Ouray. for better local management. That was a support from the Forest Service, from support from local leaders, locally led initiative. We have a companion bill over in the Senate with Senators Bennett and Hickenlooper. So that we just had a legislative hearing in House Natural Resources Committee yesterday. The city administrator for the city of Ouray came out and testified on that bill. There wasn't a vote to move that out of committee. It was the first step in the process, but we introduced that back in October and we're able to get a hearing in just a few months. So we're looking forward to continuing to push for that. And think that would be a great win-win situation for both the Forest Service and the city of Ouray for wildfire mitigation. That reservoir up there is a great spot for helicopters and planes to pick up some water if there's fires in the San Juans. But unfortunately, the Forest Service has been unable to keep that reservoir filled because of some issues with the dam. So the city of Ouray wants to, fix the dam and then refill the reservoir so that can be utilized as a wildfire capable reservoir to combat wildfires up there. Another bill that I wanted to mention, this bill has not been introduced yet, but we have drafted a discussion draft and had a legislative hearing on this back in May. But this is called the Fostering Opportunities to Restore Ecosystems Through Sound Tribal Stewardships Act, or the Forest Act. So this is kind of a comprehensive bill that oversees the relationship between tribes and the Forest Service. And it's kind of like a companion, if you will, to Fix Our Forests, but mostly focusing on the tribal aspects of forest management. So it allows for tribes to come in and do some forest management on federal land, utilizing their traditional knowledge on prescribed burns. It also allows the authority for tribes to enter into agreements for biomass energy production, and also gives out new grants and agreements to help tribes build or modernize sawmills and other infrastructure to process these trees, or probably less so trees, but more so the smaller brush that we're getting out of a lot of these forest management projects. Extends and expands Good Neighbor Authority, allowing tribes to retain the revenue from timber sales that they conduct when they conduct forest management projects on federal land, and just some general other aspects of making things easier, reducing red tape between tribes practicing active forest management on their land as well as federal land nearby. So that is still a discussion draft. As I said, it hasn't been introduced. I'm happy to send that over to Courtney and get that distributed. If there's any feedback that anyone wants to give on that bill, we'd be happy to receive that. We're working very closely with the House Natural Resources Committee and the Indian and Insular Affairs Subcommittee on getting that bill towards final stages for introduction, which obviously even once it's introduced, we can do amendments and all of that, but working on that bill with the committee, and I think enabling and promoting tribes to utilize their traditional knowledge on forest management on our federal lands, and getting more forest management happening with our tribes is both, an economic win for the tribes as well as an economic win to the rest of our, Western communities by reducing forest, wildfire risk. Moving on, I'm sure that you guys, I have not been on this call before, but I'm sure you guys have talked a lot about Fix Our Forests Act at the federal level. That has passed the House. That passed in January of 2025. So right after the Congress was sworn in, obviously we had those terrible fires in LA, which kind of prompted the passage within the House of the Fix Our Forests Act. That unfortunately seems to be the catalyst for wildfire legislation making its way through the House is massive fires, which we should be thinking about it at all times, but that's what this group is for, right? You guys are thinking about this. But obviously with Congress having not fully be made up of members that have wildfire risk in their district, it's hard to get that prioritized. But we were really happy to see that pass. Congressman Hurd is a co-sponsor of that bill. The Senate is continuing to work on that. We are continuing to pressure and ask the Senate to, come to a coalition, come to an agreement on a final version of that bill. As you guys know, there's our senators are split here in Colorado on support for that bill. Senator Hickenlooper is in support. Senator Bennett is still trying to get there. So we're definitely continuing to push and hope that that bill can make its way through the Senate and get through a final passage, whether that's changed in the Senate and then brought back to the House or passed the House version. But that's been a big, long, project, work in progress that I know a lot of members have been working on for a long time. Congressman Hurd obviously just got into Congress, so he wasn't involved in the long history of that bill, but he is working on it now and, supportive of that effort and really hoping that we can find little fixes and ways that we can continue to make forest management easier and more accessible in the West. He is also and then Fix Our Forest is kind of, the big piece of legislation that everyone has been talking about, but there's also smaller, more small scale bills that I just wanted to touch on a little bit that the House has been working on. Some of these have Senate companions, but I'm mostly just talking about what's going on in the House because that's what I follow the most close. One other bill that I wanted to mention was the Safe Routes Act. So this directs Department of Transportation to waive some vehicle weight limits for covered logging vehicles. And those covered vehicles means transporting raw or unfinished forest products when those vehicles are traveling less than 150 air miles on interstate highways, and also making sure when they have to meet state legal weight tolerances. But that's just, reducing some red tape and making it easier for logging vehicles to go across our interstate highways. Also wanted to touch on the fact that the House and the Senate and the President was able to sign the Secure Rural Schools reauthorization back in December. That was a big win for our district here in Western and Southern Colorado, as we have many of our counties have large forested areas. So that is always a fight, as I was mentioning before. Not every member of Congress has counties or areas that have federal forests in them. So creating that coalition of bipartisan Republican and Democrats support SRS, but making sure that we can, have Eastern Congress members that, are representing New York City and don't have any national forest in their district. Getting all of those folks on board is a process, but was really happy to see that pass in December and get reauthorized. Congressman Hurd is also a co-sponsor of the SHRED Act, which is a bill that you guys are likely familiar with that lets the funding stay within, or the revenue that a forest creates stay within that forest for projects and other things that the forest wants to work on. So that's something Congressman Neguse is also a big leader on the SHRED Act, as well as Secure Rural Schools. I should mention that. So we're grateful for the support and working with Congressman Neguse on both of those bills. One other thing that I want to mention at the federal level so Congressman Hurd has co-sponsored a bill called the Forest Protection and Wildland Firefighter Safety Act. This is regarding potential legal liability within the Clean Water Act for fire retardant. This has been an issue going on for a couple of years. I actually worked for a different member of Congress and was in DC before this job and was working on this bill out in DC. But so I'm biased and think it's an important issue. But this bill would basically remove that legal liability to the national or the firefighting agencies on fire retardant being used near waterways. This bill has been working its way through Congress the last couple of Congresses, but we also did have an executive order from the Trump administration on this issue directing the EPA and the USDA to kind of review, modify any of the rules and federal regulations that would hinder the use of retardant through within this issue area. And the EPA did issue some guidance back in October on this issue. There's still, I think, a little bit of ambiguity, and they're still working on it and still looking for some new regulations to fully make that permanent. But they are heading in the right direction to make sure that, you know, the Forest Service or Forest Service firefighters or BLM firefighters are not being held legally liable for discharging fire retardant. Other national level changes that I'm sure you guys are aware of, there is obviously a push at the USDA for some Forest Service reorganization in terms of regional offices closing, going to less regions. We've heard a lot of feedback here in Congressman Hurd's office on that, of some folks being wary about brain drain and, you know, less local knowledge on the ground and a more high level view of things. Happy to take more feedback on that if anyone has anything that they want to let me know about and how that would be problematic. But that it's moving slowly, I would say. There's definitely been pushback and feedback. So I think the USDA has not just like gone away with it, but they are still looking at that and gathering feedback. So also happy to take anything on that, as I said. And then also the U.S. Wildland Fire Service. So that would be the consolidation of Department of Interior. Well, it was looked at to be a full consolidation of both USDA and Department of Interior wildland firefighters. Right now, we kind of just have the Department of Interior has consolidated their wildland firefighting forces. So that's the BLM, National Park Service, Fish and Wildlife, and Bureau of Indian Affairs into the new U.S. Federal Wildland Firefighting Service, USWFS. So a little close to Fish and Wildlife Service, but that within the congressional appropriations process, we continued to fund both firefighting operations within the USDA and the Department of Interior. So that kind of was a marker to the administration that, you know, they wanted to continue looking at those as two separate buckets. There is some language in that appropriations bill to study the full consolidation, which I think is, you know, a classic thing that we do here in the federal government and the state government, is just study things. So we'll see what that study comes back with. But as of right now, we have the DOI and the USDA still have their own separate firefighting forces. And in order to fully combine those, that would need an act of Congress. And I don't think that that's going to be happening in the next, in the immediate future, at least. But we are continuing to look at that. If anyone has feedback on that, I'm happy to take that as well. Really quick, last thing, I know I'm going over, but just wanted to touch a little bit on the appropriations this year. So we did get some pretty good budget levels for our you know, land management agencies, but I would say especially our wildland firefighting agencies. The Wildland Reserve Fund, which is kind of the emergency operations for wildland firefighting, was appropriated or budgeted for its statutory maximum of $2.85 billion in this year's appropriations bill. So we're happy and pleased to see that. There was obviously the president's budget had some much steeper cuts, but this year's appropriations process was highly bipartisan. I would say a real win. We have 11 out of 12 done. We're still working on Homeland Security, but the cuts that were, you know, proposed in the president's budget were not what was realized in those final bills. I think we still got some great wins for our land management agencies, and also showed a increase and renewed focus on removing hazardous fuels near, you know, high prone wildfire risk areas within that bill as well. So there was some additional funding for that. And then also this year we authorized the permanent firefighter pay raise for our federal wildland firefighters, which was a huge win that a lot of folks have been working on for a long time, but was really pleased to see that go through. So I'm going to end on that positive note. And again, I would be welcome any further communication, whether that's on this call. I'm happy to put my email in the chat. Courtney has it as well, but great to meet all of you guys, and would love to connect if there's anything further you guys would like to connect on. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, Riley, thank you so much for those updates. Really appreciate that. I just want to open it up to see if there are any questions from the members for you. Yeah, Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I wanted to just thank you, Riley, for just really an amazing overview analysis. I've really heard some great things. Really excited to hear about Senator or Representative Hurd's involvement with a lot of important bills. My question is the wildland firefighting bill for increasing pay. I'm curious because I have been involved with efforts here in Larimer County regarding firefighter health. With that increase in pay, what kind of benefits or health screenings or support for wildland firefighters? Is it just increase in pay, or is there some increase in benefits and support for protecting their health in the long run? I'm just curious about that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I do not remember off the top of my head. I know that there is a very comprehensive bill that Congressman Neguse has been working on for a while. I don't think that all of that got moved into enactment, but there were some increases in kind of the holistic health and some more studies and payments to look at what, the efforts of these wildland firefighting heroes, or what that impact is having on their bodies and their mental health and all of that. So I'm happy to send you over some specifics on that. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I know it wasn't that full comprehensive package that we've been looking at.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. That's my only question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, Riley, feel free to stay in the meeting or hop off if you need to have other meetings. And as you may or may not know, the charge of this commission is really to advise the governor as well as the legislators, at the state capitol on forest health and wildfire mitigation related topics. And we kind of have an expanded charge now to really look at federal issues too, because as you know, there's so many federal topics that impact all the work and the recommendations that we do. So we'd love to keep you and other members of Congress and their staff, informed. And you have an open invitation to join, our meetings anytime. And yeah, let's just stay in touch. And we may have, federal recommendations too that we'll reach out to you on. Where appropriate. So thanks again for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be great. I'd love it.
Yeah, great. Okay. Next up, we have state policy updates with Allison Lurch.
Good morning, everyone. Great to see you all. And that was just a wonderful federal update, Riley. So thank you so much for being here and providing all that information. Mine's going to be a little bit more brief, but it doesn't mean that there isn't a lot going on. So as you all know, legislative session started mid-January, and DNR, of course, is tracking many bills, of course, across all sectors, not just the forestry and wildfire mitigation space, but through everything that we do here at DNR. And so I do have a list of the bills that we are tracking, but I'm happy to share that with you all after this or provide it in the notes. But I'm just going to really highlight one bill in specific that really hits on our department and the State Forest Service. And so one bill that we are working with right now is House Bill 26-1132, which is titled Practices to Support Pollinators. We're calling that the Native Plant Bill internally. And so this bill encourages the State Forest Service, the Department of Natural Resources, Department of Personnel, and the Department of Transportation to prioritize the use of in-state sources of eco-regionally specific plant material that supports pollinator habitats when certain conditions are met. And so in planning and executing a vegetation project, each agency is required to satisfy certain requirements. And to the extent practical, each agency shall coordinate with each other regarding purchasing of materials and things like that. So we're working internally with our divisions, including Colorado State Forest Service, on that bill. So we can have some updates on that as it progresses. There are a few other bills coming through the works that are referring to firefighters and emergency management, but we don't find those as applicable like internally right now to us and also to the work of the Forest Health Council. So that's the only one I'm going to update with right now. And I wanted to pass it, I believe James is on, James Lucero with Colorado State Forest Service. And I wanted to pass it to James to share a bit about what's going on at the State Forest Service with their biomass sunset.
Thanks, Allison. Hi, everybody. Good to see you. So in 2021, there was the Biomass Utilization Grant Program that was created in statute. It gave us some money to start doing some grants, basically. And in that legislation, much like the Forest Health Council is going through their own sunset report, the Biomass Utilization Grant Program was due for a sunset report, which was completed this last year. And after talking with Department of Regulatory Affairs, specifically the division that handles the sunset reports, after gathering all of the information from all of our grantees and staff, there was a conclusion from the Department of Regulatory Agencies to go ahead and sunset the Biomass Utilization Grant Program. There was a whole host of reasons. Basically, they said that we fulfilled the duties that were laid out in that legislation to give those grants. There's not a lot of, as you guys have been kind of listening, there's not a lot of money to kind of go around into this next budget cycle. And so in order to continue that, there would have to be some more grant money given to us. And that is not looking likely. And so the department has actually moved for that program to sunset. We still have the ability to do all of our other biomass authorities, working with individual homeowners and doing anything like that. And so unfortunately, it just means that this biomass grant utilization program will sunset. And it went through its first committee hearing to go ahead and accept those findings. And we're just waiting for that bill to be introduced formally that will formally sunset the grant program.
Thanks, James. That was great. And now, I'm going to pass it to one other person in the group, and then we can open it up if anybody has any questions. This is not from, the state legislature, but I just wanted to give some highlight and be able to pass it to Paige Lewis here in a minute. Some of you may have seen in the news that a 2026 ballot measure was filed by a coalition of conservation organizations in late December. Bruce funding generated through sales tax on outdoor gear. And since we have Paige Lewis as part of our Forest Health Council, I wanted to pass it over to her to be able to share some information about this. Before I pass it over, just as a reminder, DNR cannot take formal positions on these measures, but we would like to hear more about it from the Nature Conservancy's perspective.
Great. Thanks so much, Allison. I will first caveat that I am not the expert at the Nature Conservancy on this ballot initiative. That is my colleague, Erin Citron, but I'm happy to provide an overview. And if there are any, more in the weeds questions, I can take those back and follow up. So as Allison said, there is a coalition of conservation organizations, including the Nature Conservancy, Trust for Public Land, Western Resource Advocates, Conservation Colorado, that has been working with a whole variety of stakeholders for quite some time to develop this ballot initiative concept And, as it has moved forward through several iterations of polling, the mechanism being proposed is, as Allison said, debrucing sales tax from sort of outdoor gear, sporting gear, to allow the state to use the funds received to invest in two primary purposes. The first is using the current sort of mechanisms available through GOCO to invest additional funding in implementation of the Colorado Outdoor Strategy, which hopefully most of you are familiar with. And then the second purpose is to invest via existing forest and fire related grant programs to increase funding available for that work. And it's roughly, it's a little less, it's about 95% of the total funds, which are anticipated to be about 170 million annually, depending on sales tax received. 95% of those funds would be split evenly between those two beneficiaries. And then 2.5% would go to the Outdoor Equity Grant Program, 2.5% would go to the Office for Outdoor Recreation for workforce development grants. And then there is also a provision for a one-time investment of 10 million in the newly created Prescribed Fire Liability Claims Fund to just get that started, because as you may recall, it was established but not funded in the previous legislative session. So right now, the group has gone forward. They've received a title. They've done, several rounds of polling. They have a good title because it says it doesn't indicate taxes would be increased. So it's sort of without increasing taxes shall, which is generally more favorable kind of title. And so it says the measure will be before the title board for review and final title setting on March 4th. So coming right up. So I anticipate that there will be some final decisions about this. And some of you may have been involved in some of the forest related conversations, because that was also discussed and vetted through the work initiative that's being facilitated by Keystone Policy Center, the Wildfire and Watershed Initiative for Resilient Colorado, which also has been thinking about ways to increase funding, I think both public and private. And this, I think, could be a component of that on the public side. So that's kind of the general overview of what's happening. We think it's a pretty exciting opportunity. There's not that many opportunities to increase, large scale conservation funding that come along. So hopeful that this will be able to move forward, and happy to answer any questions or write down any questions that I can't answer and take those to others.
Okay, thanks so much, Paige, for that update. I know there's been some information in the news about it, and so we appreciate you giving us an update on that. What questions do you all have for Paige on this? And maybe I have the first one, if I don't see any hands up. But you went to the title board, you got the language, it sounds like approved, and I think anyone that has concerns will have like an opportunity to maybe challenge the title board, I think, at some point. So, but that may have been past that due date. But is the language pretty much set, or are you all contemplating like, another ballot question and tweaking the language or anything like that? I know sometimes groups have 5 different ballot languages, and they want to see which language sticks the best and so forth. But do you think that language is pretty much finalized now?
I'll have to follow up with you for the final answer, but I know that they have done some they've had an initial meeting with the title board. I know that they're settled on, I think the language that is like the final draft. But since I see on notes from Aaron that they have another meeting on March 4th, I'm guessing that it's not fully finalized.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to find out more of the details about, what is the go, no go decision and how and when will people be able to weigh in and send that back around. I know they're also working on finalizing a fact sheet to be able to share, to circulate about this. So that suggests to me too that they're getting close to wanting to engage people and support.
Yeah. Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. Because I know I think there's individuals and organizations that, look at the language and, they're like, hey, it's missing this component or that component, or it has this or whatever. And my guess is folks want to probably let you all know if there's a possibility, hey, could it be amended still, or if it's like totally set. But Commissioner Shattuck McNally, question?
Yeah, thank you. And Mr. Chair, thank you, Paige. And I appreciate the information. I think it's all hands on deck, and I appreciate the really thoughtful approach to this. And also, I'm sure you have some polling data and some information like I have. As your organization knows, we're also looking at a local measure, and we're so close to a no go position. I mean, so close. It's almost like not to use a football analogy, but we're like inside the red zone. So I'm curious how you see local measures kind of complementary or balancing, or not balancing, but maybe complementary, partnering with maybe the statewide measure. Do you feel like that? I don't know what your thoughts are on, do you think the ballot is going to be crowded as it is, or what are your thoughts on some of those thoughts? Or do you have that answer? I don't know if you can even answer that, so just curious.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm gonna write that down and get back to you because I do think that's a good question. I mean, there's a whole team that has been thinking about this, every day quite a bit. I think it's a good question though. I know there was at least initially some of the conversations I was in about trying to pair those kinds of initiatives because, even $170 million is not going to fund all the needs for either the Colorado Outdoor Strategy or for the forest and fire work. And so I do think it makes sense to pair, local initiatives and also even think about how these new funds could leverage federal funding. So, but let me get back to you, Commissioner. Let me pose that to the group and get back to you.
Yeah, and if I might, Mr. Chair, just to follow up on that, we had a biomass study ourselves as we got that $200,000 grant from, I'm speaking as a commissioner right now, I apologize, but I know that we had our $200,000 biomass study we got the grant for, and so we know the kind of where we need to go and critical areas. I think that for our staff, I'm penciling that on, or not penciling out anymore. We have some research and data looking at that it would be at least 8 to 10 million a year, just for ongoing for decades to kind of keep up with the work. And so I just curious about that because obviously 64 counties needing even just that, much that it could be, as you said, it probably would help tremendously, but I really hope that there's a way for all the measures that kind of complementary to meet the urgent need and scale and scope. But thank you.
Great, thanks so much. Commissioner Waters had her hand up, but
My hand was up, but I'm
oh,
not sure if you can hear me. My
okay,
cell is spotty here, but my quick
yeah,
question
we can
is
hear you. We can hear you. Yeah.
perfect. My quick question is regarding some of that polling data, what was some of the feedback that was received from the outdoor industry? I know this is debrucing, so it's just keeping the revenue that has already been collected. And so they wouldn't necessarily receive those dollars back. But I was just curious to know how some of the outdoor industry was responding to this proposal.
I mean, I don't know, Samantha, if you've been involved in these negotiations, but I know there was a lot of conversation around making sure that some of this funding goes to the Office of Outdoor Recreation as a way to bolster funds that were available to that state entity to support the outdoor industry. So I think that was made, that addition was made in response to some of the conversations with outdoor industry and outdoor industry advocates, I will say. But that is another thing that I can follow up on as well.
Yeah, thanks, Paige. Samantha, you want to add anything?
Yeah, thanks, Paige. Thanks, Director. Yeah, just like Allison mentioned earlier, as a state entity, we can't take a formal position on this, but, just hearing about the industry's needs, that was one of the reasons, to Paige's point, that this consideration for funding for programs that would directly support the outdoor industry was also included. So yeah, I'd be happy to follow up with additional information, and I can touch base with you, Paige, and we can figure out how to send that out to the group.
Great.
Thanks all.
Okay, awesome.
I might just say also with relation to the polling consistently showed that wildfire and water are the top public concerns. So I think, which is not surprising, I think, to this group, but continued to confirm that. And then, followed by things like sort of wildlife habitat and, care for public lands. But wildfire risk and healthy watersheds are super important.
Definitely. Okay, well, thanks, Paige. I appreciate. I know you have to leave early, so good to see you.
It looks
Anything
like
else? Any other
Madeline had a
questions?
question. I don't know if you
Okay.
wanted to.
Okay, sure, Madeline. I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Paige, great update. I'm really, really excited about this initiative. And just have a comment of maybe the role of the Forest Health Council in addition to this initiative. I'm really glad to see a recommendation from the Legislative Committee to continue funding for some of these programs that are highlighted through the ballot initiative, like Furworm, Co-swap, Healthy Forest, Vibrant Communities. And I believe, as Paige mentioned, 175 million, that's fantastic. That's still not all of the funding, that's needed to address this issue. And so I'd encourage the council to try to advocate to the legislature to continue funding for those existing programs, even though there might be an influx of funding coming through this ballot initiative. So maintaining the funding from severance tax for Co-swap and general operating fund from Furworm, because we'll need them to be additive. I have heard some questions about that from some of our local partnerships as well as, does this mean with the ballot initiative that the state won't need to fund these programs anymore? And I'll say, being in some of those work group discussions, we felt very strongly that both needed to proceed forward. So it could be a role for the Forest Health Council. And I think we're on the right track with the legislative recommendations already. And Commissioner Shattuck McNally, I'd just add the local ballot initiative versus the statewide ballot initiative conversations that we've had here in Jefferson County. In my opinion, having that local funding makes you more attractive for the state funding, because those grant programs all require a match. So a match for Co-swap, a match for Furworm. If you are able to have that local funding, you can leverage that to get more state funding as well. So that's some of the messaging that we're using here in Jefferson County that I've seen resonate, that there is a need for both. I'd also say the work group has identified a need for about $200 million a year for forest management. And that's going to need to come from a diversity of sources, not just one pot of statewide, but local, federal, private sector, and combined. So there's some good materials about that as well.
Great. Thanks, Madeline. Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
If I might just respond, Madeline, thank you. That's great to hear, and I appreciate it. And I pretty much kind of thought that anyway, and appreciated that. And also that's something that I am trying to add to that local initiative, is a bucket full of matching funds for our partners in the area, just to help with, leveraging the resources and helping them expand it, because we need it's all hands on deck, as we all know. Thank you so much, Madeline.
Great. Any other comments or questions regarding this ballot question? Okay, seeing none. Next, I will turn it over to Allison and Courtney. Allison has an update for the Forest Health Council for the sunset review component that we have statutorily, and then Courtney will also share an update on the 30-year vision. So, Allison, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dan. I believe we mentioned this at our last quarterly meeting as well, that the Forest Health Council was under a sunset review. So Director Gibbs and I worked with Dora last year on producing documentation and all of that. And so the sunset review was presented to the House Ag and Natural Resource Committee last month on January 22nd. The committee voted to approve the sunset report recommendation to continue the council. So the next step is for a bill to be introduced to carry out this recommendation. And so that's where we're at right now. Representatives Lukens and Morrow were assigned as our prime sponsors for this. And then Representatives McCormick, Lindsay, Goldstein, and Smith volunteered to be co-sponsors. So there'll be more to come on that. And as we see bill language and all of that, we'll have more to share.
Great. Any questions for Allison? Okay, see none. Courtney.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Allison. I'm going to share an update on the 30-year vision, which this group worked really hard to create and adopt last year. Right now, well, let's see, I think it was at the October meeting, this group approved the report kind of in a Word document, and now the State Forest Service is very generously taking that sort of classic Word document report and turning it into something really beautiful and polished that we'll be able to share with you all and legislators and the governor. So that is in the design process right now, and I imagine in the next few weeks it'll be available for you all to view. Another update is that we unfortunately we were not awarded the student group from CU's Masters in the Environment program. It was a very competitive round, they said, with I think 60 different projects being presented or offered to the students, and only 35 were selected. And so unfortunately, we won't be having that student group join us, but we still think it's very important to make a plan to facilitate the implementation of the 30-year vision. And we know that council members themselves or council staff will not be the ones to do the implementation. They won't be the ones in high schools talking about stewardship, or they won't be the ones necessarily creating grants or completing watershed health projects, but we think that there's a lot of work to be done facilitating the implementation. We imagine a role for someone to build a network, convene perhaps working groups for the themes, identify next steps for completing actions and goals. And then this facilitating either person or group committee can also develop a tracking mechanism and dashboard and ultimately support the updating of the vision. I also imagine this person or this group helping comb through the report and determine within the report what can be prioritized and accomplished by the council, and where there are opportunities for legislation to influence the vision and support the vision. So internally at DNR, we're exploring options to facilitate implementation, and we've created this suite of options that really range from a lot of additional resources being allocated, which would require a funding request, to perhaps using outside resources like a student group, again, or working within the current allocation of resources. So this sort of list of options is still being considered internally at DNR, and we're trying to understand what is feasible, especially given the tight budget years and things like that. So we're working internally to see what's feasible, and then we'd love to continue to present this and get feedback from the council in the meetings to come. You'll notice a little later in the meeting during the legislative update that there is a priority related to 30-year vision implementation. And we put that there as a placeholder. So we don't yet know it's reasonable for that to become a legislative recommendation or not, but we wanted to include it as a placeholder because it is a priority of the council to continue making progress on the 30-year vision. So by the next meeting, we'll have more information about whether or not we'll be able to turn that into a budget request, or we'd like to seek outside resources or work within the current allocated resources. If anyone has any questions, Allison and I are available to share more about the 30-year vision process.
Okay, any questions? It all sounds good to me, Courtney. Thank you for those updates. Appreciate that. Okay, next we have our agenda item on legislative committee update. And before I turn it over to Commissioner Shattuck McNally, I just want to say how incredible I thought the legislative breakfast was a couple of weeks ago. And I know Jody, you'll probably go in a little more detail, but I know many of you were able to attend that, so thank you for attending that. I heard really positive feedback from legislators and how cool for the folks who are able to be there to go on the Senate floor too and get recognized. That doesn't happen very often. Special shout out to the folks that really help pay for the food and all this stuff for sponsoring it. Morgan Timber Products, Excel Energy, National Wild Turkey Federation, Commissioner Shattuck McNally, and the State Forest Service. So thank you. Round of applause for all the sponsors for helping with that. That was awesome. And I know we've made some slight adjustments for our timeline for the legislative recommendations. So rather than adopt those now, I think we're going to be giving kind of overview of what that looks like and then give a little bit more time. And there's really no huge hurry to adopt those because there may be new information that pops up, or the legislative session may introduce certain bills that we need to adapt to or adjust to. So, but a huge thank you to everyone and my team, of course, too, for helping to make all that happen. Roberta, Courtney, and Allison, I know you all were there, I don't know, 6 a.m. or something crazy like that. So Commissioner Shattuck McNally, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Dan. I appreciate all those shout outs. I echo most of what you just shared. And I want to say, as a legislative committee, when I kind of brought this up, we thought, can we do this like county commissioners do? We have breakfast. So, and I thought there was really a lot of new legislators, as we talked earlier, with Riley, with Congressman Hurd's office. There's a lot of folks, this is not their area of expertise, and any information that we could share to raise awareness, especially about the work we've done, and being this committee is directly linked to reporting to the general legislature and the governor's office. I thought it was great to kind of put a face and projects, a name and face of the projects into us, and I heard great feedback as well. I agree. I want to thank Mr. Morgan and Excel and Paige and the Wild Turkey Federation. I was very glad to make the stickers, and then we also had Colorado State Forest Service making this wonderful flyer, and I was hoping maybe we could share that with the full council. So they have that to maybe share in case they run into some of their legislators. They can share that again. It had an amazing QR code on it. I think Christina Bury and her team at the Colorado State Forest Service did a fantastic job. But that QR code allows folks to go directly to the website and get to see projects that they funded through the general legislature and see the success of that, and see that, hey, we voted on this and it passed, and look what it has done. And I think that's things that are really important for them to see, because sometimes they pass bills and they may not see the outcomes in the long run. So I want to just commend everyone for a job well done. I've been to a lot of these, and it's been it's really great time to mention them, and to have the whole council invited on the floor of the Senate. I agree is a big deal, and appreciate all the support from Senator Cutter and others. The only complaint I heard, and I'll just share this, and it was repeated to me a lot, and that day was, we didn't get to take our picture with Smokey Bear. So so that was kind of the people were looking and coming out of the house. Where's Smokey? I want to take a picture. So That's the only thing. And I know that's giggly, but that drew them in. So I don't remember whose idea that was, but that was fantastic. So we thought, and also what we're doing, just to follow up, we had last week's legislative committee. As you know, we meet every 2 weeks, almost the entire year. We talked about a lot of feedback and things that we kind of, in hindsight, wanted to find out. Who came? Did they find something? What was the outcome? Did they feel like they learned something or they understand more? So we're looking at, I'm not sure if it was, oh, yep, thank you, Colorado State Forest. And I'm trying never to say Smokey the Bear, it's Smokey Bear. But to maybe have Daphne with your office or someone reach out, thanking them for coming and thanking them for stopping by, making sure that sheet is there with the QR code and give them a little survey or something. Maybe they want more information, just some way to reach out, and then we can gauge who came, because we did have a lot of legislators, but we also had a lot of aides and some other folks in the Capitol who are policymakers or staff, probably staff or policy. Staff to the policymakers. So I just said that would be maybe a good follow-up for us just to get some feedback. Just because it was our first one. And we also wanted to ask you all if you wanted to add some feedback, because we had pretty much almost a full legislative council, but we had a lot of the full Forest Health Council as well. As all of us are their full Forest Health Council, we just wanted to also look for your feedback. I know a lot of this call were there, and we're so thrilled to have you there. Thanks for coming down. We had one commissioner one last week, but it was even earlier than ours. It was at 7, then we have another one coming up. So it is a lot to get down there and get in the building. And so I appreciate the effort. So Courtney, were you going to send out a survey? I can't remember. Or did we want to ask for any feedback right now?
I think if any council members have feedback on the breakfast.
Yeah. Do you have anybody have any feedback right now?
Okay. I would just say that I love the idea of doing some kind of follow-up, because I do feel like so often we do those kind of events and we don't really know what the impact was other than the people we saw on that day. And so I think that would be really great and would be helpful for planning future similar events.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, I had shared one about, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh no,
Director
I was
Gibbs?
just gonna say my quick feedback is just like that we continue it, that it was really successful and we can build on it for next year. And yeah, I thought it was fabulous. So
I agree, and I enjoyed it. And I wanted to share, besides this Smokey Bear comment, which I really still get a giggle out of that. I did see probably 10 legislators a couple days later at a weekend event, and just thank them all for coming, whether I knew they came or not. And one had said, "Oh, yeah, I just walked by, but you're right, my aide was there." But probably 3 out of the 10 said, "I put my sticker on my water bottle. I love that." And so I just wanted to share that I ordered 250. I only have 20 left. So if that shares how many went out. I hope some of you kept some. And if you didn't, I would love to, I'll try to hold a few back, and I really thank everyone for supporting that. So I'll try to keep a few aside, and thanks again for all of that. So if there's no other feedback, certainly you can, if you think of some, I'm sure you can email Director Gibbs or Courtney that feedback. So, okay, I guess we'll move on. And we wanted to share some of our discussions from this last year. Usually we come up and have, as Director Gibbs said, we vote on recommendations today. But we feel if there's not a lot of pressure, we still feel like we need to further explore and refine some of the recommendations. And I think you'll find that the recommendations that we have started off so far, and Courtney, do you want me to share my screen, or can you share my slides? I'm sorry, go ahead. Do you want me? Okay, thank you. Is that we're kind of coming up with some of the same themes, and with the challenges of lack of funding and shrinking resources everywhere, and some of the uncertainty we just wanted to take a little more time to be thoughtful. So you'll see some of these have placeholders, and we're going to go through some of the ones that we have. We have a full list and spreadsheet. We've been having a lot of conversations on deliberating this. We had some fantastic presentations, and we are going to look to have a couple more to dive into a couple of the areas, and I think you'll see that coming up as we talk. So the first one we want to talk about is the 30-year vision. And the 30-year vision, as you know, it's a great vision. Here's what I based the sticker off of, and there is a lot to do there. There's some important strategies and steps to go forward, and always it's the secret sauce, I think, for any great plan is a great implementation. As you all know, we don't get any funding really directly for the Forest Health Council. You know, the state departments have been very generous with supporting some of this work that we have done. So we have a placeholder. So how do we put aside some funding for implementation, and what does that look like? And is there a way to do that efficiently and innovatively with the consideration of constrained resources? So that is the first one of the first recommendations that we have been wrestling with, because this is really the core North Star of our work, and I think really important to not put this on a shelf, but continue advancing what is in the vision, as this is kind of, I always call it the North Star. So that's the first recommendation. And so the next one that we have is biomass. We know when we do this as a full Forest Health Council that it ranks in the top half, but it never quite rises to the top. This is I'm forgive me for using some of the terms, but just for fun and discussions, I'm trying to come up with some fun terms. I call it the gnarly elephant. It's a lot of big things in this space, and that we need to tackle. And we are also looking about when we have some recommendations here, but we also think we need to dive in a little further. So we are suggesting, let me just cover some of the low-hanging fruit that we think would be an easy, not an easy fix, but something to go ahead and look at. And the first is, we had gotten some recommendations, especially for smaller counties and remote areas, is to look at some of the regulations around the flame cap kilns for biochar feasibility. This is not a silver bullet, but it is one prong or one area that maybe, you know, we have seen in some counties, even in my county for the air curtain burners, but also with these biochar feasibility, they're regulated maybe as strongly as some industrial things. And maybe we need to see if there's a way to re-regulate some of those regulations to make them lower barriers for this portion of the biomass. And so I think that is definitely one of those low-hanging fruits that may not take a lot of funding, but might be one of those ideas that if we add all these little small things together, might move on. The other one we have is some opportunities for bioindustry, and how can we partner together and bring departments and industry together, and maybe making a proof of concept or incentivizing these opportunities for an incentive program for a campus, or bringing bioenergy onto this campus. And there is a federal loan program that is available, and this might be a way for us to leverage funding to try to bring people together. And so that's another area that we want to explore a little further. Courtney, was there another point there? I'm trying to look at my notes. I'm trying to think, was there something else there? I think that was all of it, but I just wanted to see. And then along with that, and in addition to the opportunities for bioenergy, is economic incentives. And we're really feeling like we, between the Fire Commission and OEDIT and the Workforce Development Group, and even school districts, there might be an opportunity for us to partner together and bring funding from all those different areas to come together to help maybe advance this for a woody biomass campus, a bioenergy industry coming onto a woody biomass campus that we're considering in Larimer County. We found an opportunity where the Fire Commission that we didn't know is funding a program in Poudre School District where they graduated 40 wildland firefighter students through high school. They graduated with this degree and they went off to become wildland firefighters and also join mitigation crews. And that was through a grant through, that was something we were looking at, but we didn't know. So trying to bring those all in together was something that we had hoped to add. And so I see our slides are changed. Courtney, is that? I just want to go back to.
Are they back to
No.
biomass? Okay, let me try. What are you seeing now?
I don't see anything.
Oh, okay. Let's try it again.
I apologize. It's just like, whoops, there it went. Well, I'll just keep talking. So we feel, with woody biomass, we really need more active management. This is almost unanimous high priority consensus for the entire legislative council. We just feel like there's the more treatments, the more work that we're doing is leaving that woody biomass on sites and fuel manipulations. Could we support the products we make? We're economical. I think there was a suggestion of extending a tax credit for beetle kill wood. We definitely know there still needs to be infrastructure and expansion or enhancements. How can we partner with industry or academia or innovative entrepreneurs for expanding with the wood products industry, supporting that or finding other ways to do enhancements? Of course, this is a big one that I'm not sure is something that could be tackled in one year, but reducing costs for transportation through lots of different methods. And then also just looking at the Colorado Mass Timber Coalition, how can we connect with them and get some of those feedback? And then also we had talked about this a few years ago. We had looked at sponsoring some projects that it didn't quite make it out of the House. It was so close. It was one vote away, but having community/management programs to help communities work together. And so all those under woody biomass is still something we feel like this is a high priority to try to find some of this solutions for this. And that's why we wanted to kind of pause on this to bring some folks maybe from the Colorado Mass Timber Coalition or other experts. Even in this council, we have lots of expertise or folks who might have some energy or some interest in this that would like to maybe come to one of our meetings and discuss this further. We are planning a meeting here, I believe in March. I'm not sure. Courtney, Allison, I remember we're going to invite a few people in this area to that meeting. Do we remember which one of the other ones we were going to look at inviting?
I think we have a meeting in 2 weeks and I don't have the list on me. So it's not this Friday, but next Friday.
So I welcome you all to come. We would love to have your input. We need your input. We need your expertise. They're on Friday mornings at 8:30 to 9:30. Sometimes we go to 10. We haven't quite made that agenda, but if you can even come to part of that, we really welcome your thoughts and comments on this. And it's we feel it's something that we need to, there's a cost of doing nothing, and it might be something that we need to figure out maybe a path forward, and we are asking for your support and help with that. Let's move on to the, and that's the other thing. Let me go back into the re-regulation, the flame kill. I have some more details on that. Right now, producing biochar in a flame cap kiln is classified as like incinerating construction material, which really makes it prohibitively costly compared to piling and burn slashing. And these flame cap kilns are very small and aren't likely to count for slash treatment at scale, but it's certainly a common sense maybe fix that would lower, like I said, barriers for someone interesting to do that at a smaller scale. And we really think that is an important thing to maybe add to the list. And then let's see, the other one is still just like I mentioned before, extending the beetle kill sales tax exemption and expanding it to other bark beetles that except for the emerald ash borer tree. So that's one thing we're asking to pause on, and we don't have a concrete. We have some of those small ones that are concrete, but we're looking for further discussion on that. So let's go to the next slide. And this is workforce. And as you probably no surprise, this is another continued theme. We've had some success here, and we still are kind of bringing these ideas. Last year, we know the 4-H extension, and we ran a bill trying to help maybe start a pathway or a streamline of maybe middle school to high school for workforce through this program by offering forestry pathways through 4-H, since that is in every county in the state and that infrastructure is already there. And so that would be an easier implementation. That did not pass. And as you know, that was a bill that came out of Appropriations Committee that got redlined pretty much and changed completely. And so that did not pass in the long run. And I had some conversations with Extension the last week or two. They have already purchased with some creative funding the forestry program of the 4-H program, and so they're adapting it for Colorado, and because we don't have all the same trees as across the nation, and they're still trying to be prepared and maybe try to find some way to, because they love the idea and they think this is needed, and seeing the success with the Poudre School District program, they feel like this is still something they're interested in. So we're still looking at maybe a streamlined, narrowed 4-H workforce program and trying to address that by adding the gifts and donations or extended, so it's not just legislative funding, but other opportunities for folks to invest in 4-H or this kind of program. As one of the first bills that we were successful with was Senate Bill 23005, which was a really successful bill. We have seen great results from that and lots of great feedback. And so we talked about looking at just as keeping the funding for furworm and co-swap, which was mentioned before. How do we maintain the progress we have made as a Forest Health Council with the bills or the efforts that we have already had great success on? How do we keep that going forward and not lose ground on some of those gains that we had made since the Forest Health Council reconstituted and became who we are today? And so we really want to look back at that bill, Senate Bill 5, and extending or reauthorizing beyond July 2027. Since we're talking about 2027 legislative priorities, this would match with that. And so also looking still, part of that was additional appropriation for internship programs. We know a lot of folks would like to do these internship programs, but also cost of living and having folks be able to afford that. This is, and thank you, Allison, for, putting that in the tax chat. I appreciate that. So also looking for additional appropriations for community college and high schoolers, since it's not only one pathway, but trying to expand all of that. And we know that's where Senate Bill 5 has been really effective, is in the community college area. And also, again, I mentioned how there is a bill currently, I think called the Big Three, where school districts are working to try to expand and keep the success of the programming that for students to go get this wildland firefighting and mitigation skills through this program that had been asked for and funded through the Fire Commission. And so that's something we really want to explore as well. And then the ability to receive gifts, grants, and donations, maybe adding that on. So if there's philanthropy or other folks who could come in and help support some of these programs to keep them going or expand them, I think is really important to share. I see one more bullet there. Courtney, is that, is there one more there? Because I see a circle, but I don't know what the next one was. Let me just look at that.
I can't see it either.
Yeah, I can't see it either. It's not on the other side. Okay.
It might
Well,
be
let's move
empty.
on.
It looks empty to me.
It looks empty. Okay, great. I just wanted to double check. So those are, again, I'm sure it's not a surprise. This is something we've all talked about for almost every year about workforce and having increasing capacity for the needs that we have. Okay, and then I want to just add to that as well. Colorado Succeeds and the Career Development Incentive Program is also maybe we can look to partner and see if some of our needs can fit into some of those avenues. We haven't explored that yet. And so we're also looking to maybe bring them or reach out to them and get some information and see what we can do in that avenue. If any of you, again, have any insights, thoughts, or ideas here, that is something we welcome and hope that you will come either email or contact us, come to the meeting, and let us know your thoughts on that. Because again, I think the biggest thing we're facing right now is how great ideas, but how do we innovatively fund or help implement or expand some of these, or at least keep them as well. The next and last kind of area that we have been looking at, and we've been looking at a lot of areas, but these rose up kind of the top of our, I know, because we can't have all the ideas. I think we are limited to 5. Is just the utilities area, as we have a representative for Xcel Energy who is representing the utilities industry, and it was really important to listen to them and some of the challenges they have. This also was a very kind of maybe low dollar but high priority for a majority of the council. And it really feels like it has a high impact on all of the residents and citizens due to utility shutdowns, et cetera. And how can we just avoid some of the situations we've seen in California and stuff? So there was an idea that utilities needed to be included in public lands management planning, since utilities is across the state, and maybe just having some of their feedback and having some of their perspectives brought in would be really helpful. Including utilities to identify high need areas for treatment or reduce wildfire impacts to utility infrastructure is really important in terms of all these red flag warnings that we have, natural disasters that, I mean, I don't think there's anyone on this call who's not thinking what kind of summer or increased risk we're going to see this summer. It's kind of keeps me up sometimes. And so we just wanted to see about how we could address that. And in addition, look at fixes to terms of right-of-way licenses or permits to facilitate this where it's needed, which the ability to do work when a high risk is identified, there's kind of this paralyzing of the process, or maybe some strong regulations that maybe people need to act with immediacy. And maybe this is more of a federal issue, but since we're talking about federal issues, but we also think this would apply at a state level. But a policy change might allow for some emergency type fashion, type absent when there's a fire. So for instance, if they're doing some work in their easement and there's a hazard tree that is 1 foot away from their easement, but is certainly identified as a hazard, is there a way to work with trying to help utilities when they're already up in some of these areas that need to be mitigated to kind of lower those barriers for them to address some of those identified needs that would be helpful in the long run? And so that's a very complex thing, but it's something that I think utilities had identified in our legislative committee as a potential thing to work on. So we're also looking if anyone has some feedback on that. I know we're working with our representative, Julie Stencil, who's trying to pull permit and pull some of those references for us to inform even more to a degree of making a solid policy recommendation. And that's why we also are pausing, so we can look in that a little more deeply. And I think Julie's on there. Julie, did I explain that well enough? Do you just wanted to share? Wonder if that was okay.
I think Julie had to hop off
Okay.
the trial.
Okay, just checking. And then I think that was the last of the slides for that. But I just want to make note as well. We still are, and we've had a lot of discussions about the mountain pine beetle outbreak. And we know we kind of put a placeholder there, but we also think this connects with the workforce, the woody biomass solution, because that maybe adds an extra layer of complexity to that. And how can we, as a Forest Health Council or Legislative Committee, support the task force that we'll hear about later? And what opportunities can we do the cross landscape cooperation and also cross jurisdictional with our federal and state partners about high risk zones, management, cooperation, education, reforestation, and how, how with our forest vision, our whole forest health view, how does that fit into that implementation? I think there was a term used, and maybe I'm saying this incorrectly, but we need to maybe look ahead for reforestation and things, and not be just chasing dead trees, but how do we get ahead and maybe as forest health help with some of those reforestation and ideas on the other end. So that was also a placeholder, but wasn't at the very top, but I just wanted to share that too, that we did have that discussion. So as you can see, some concrete ideas, but also just a lot we'd like to refine and dig in deeper. And we really are asking for your participation, ideas, expertise, and help. So with that, that's all I have to share. We've been really having some robust conversations, and I would say everyone on our committee has been engaged and very active and providing a lot of information and feedback. So with that, I'll have any questions, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to share. As you see, it's a lot of strong ideas, but still a lot of how do we find the exact legislative recommendation and policy to pull out of that. And Courtney, I saw that you wanted to add something, and I appreciate anything you'd like to add.
Yeah. Thanks, Jody. And I think at the same time, we can take questions. And then I had also prepared a little sort of poll if people wanted to give feedback on the different concepts. Maybe you have some expertise or you have a great contact in this space. So I was going to put the poll, or it's a survey maybe, up on the screen. So maybe Jody can take questions and then we can put the survey up.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder about the poll, because I know not everyone, maybe you want to think about this throughout the meeting and add information as we're working. So we welcome all of it. Any questions?
Yeah, thanks so much. So questions on this.
Yeah, I just asked, does anyone think of any of those ideas or maybe in the right area, or anything they're interested in that we're talking about or want to add for us to talk about?
I think let's see what this poll says here.
Yes. So what I have is a chance. It's another one of these Minty surveys. So I have a slide for each of the themes. So we have one for 30-year vision, we have one for biomass, one for workforce, and one for utilities. And I think this is a chance. I think you can click on the word Minty. I think you can click on the QR code. And I think you can also scan it. And if you have, maybe we just leave it up for a few minutes on each slide. And this is a way for more members of the council to give feedback and ideas and suggestions to the legislative committee, because I know you all can't make it to all the meetings, but we would love to keep hearing from you all. Oh, I was hoping your information would show up. How can I? I would love for it to just show up as we go. Let's see. How can I make that happen?
Hey, Courtney, like during the
Yes.
meeting or even after the meeting, because folks may want to like think about this more, like what feedback do you have for the 30-year implementation of the vision? Is this going to be like kind of open indefinitely or for a week or something? I don't know.
Yes,
Well,
I can
okay.
leave it open. I was hoping that you would all get to see your comments appear.
Amy?
Thanks, Director Gibbs. Commissioner Shattuck McNally, could you remind me the next steps in terms of timeline for you all? I know you covered that, but can you touch on that
Yeah,
again?
great question. So usually by this meeting, because of we had backed up, we have that timeline, we kind of backward planned about when we need to have recommendations. And usually there at this time, the administration and the state departments were crafting budgets together, and we wanted to get those recommendations in early to kind of maybe see if we could kind of rise those up. And so we know that's kind of in flux right now because we know there's no money. So we've heard that. I mean, I hear that almost every day. And I'm telling people every day there's no money from the county. So, but we're now looking at, since there's a bill to renew the Forest Health, the Welfare Matters Interim Committee, that we know when that usually is in the summer. And so when they ask for us to come and present our legislative ideas, so we feel like we probably have maybe another month or two to kind of refine these, and that means like 3 or more meetings for us. And then for the next full council, we could vote, hopefully have those ready for the next meeting for the full council to bring those ideas forward. And so that's probably the timeline is for the full council to be able to see them before that committee meets in the summer, so we could finalize some of those priorities and vote on those and have them be official. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And thanks for
Yeah.
all your work in putting these together.
Yeah. And usually this would be where we do it, but we just, since we felt like we had more flexibility, we wanted to kind of take the pressure off of us trying to come up with something, which not just coming up with something, but we were trying to tease some ideas out. And we have some good ideas, but we also feel like maybe there's time for us to even think outside the box or innovatively with all of you to maybe craft these in a way to really help and support our mission and trying to help with the work that we all know needs to be done. So I hope that helps. Thank you for that question.
Great. Any other questions for Commissioner Shattuck McNally? Thanks so much for all your great work on this.
Yeah, well, it's the whole council, and I just want to thank them all. They all come and we work very hard and talk, and I just wanted to thank them all. And if they all, yeah, no one's really kind of spoken up, but I just wanted to say if any of them wanted to add anything, that would be great. So if
Okay.
not,
And then
but yeah.
here's the feedback stuff. This is for biomass.
Yeah, my intention was to quickly, or take a few minutes on each theme, and I accidentally stopped screen sharing, so you all stopped providing feedback. But thank you for everything on the 30-year vision, and whatever you provide here, it is anonymous, and then I'll export it so that the legislative committee. So if you have a resource, I suppose, put your name on it so that if you have something to share, we know where it's coming from, or if you have feedback on resources or ideas. Commissioner Waters, you should be able to click on the QR code and get to the survey. And as Dan suggested, I will share this out following the meeting so people can continue to provide resources and feedback.
Yeah, I wonder if you could also send out an email to the whole group too, so they can look at this even like after the meeting, if
Yeah,
folks give it some more thought.
absolutely. I'll just plan on doing that then so nobody feels rushed. But if you did have feedback for workforce or biomass, we have a few minutes for you to add it.
Has anyone responded to any of them yet?
The
Yeah.
30-year vision theme did get comments. I'm not sure if people are able to click on hopefully you should just be able to follow along after you click the QR code once. Okay, I'll explore if you'll be able to fill it out outside the meeting. That's a good point, Katie.
Okay.
Okay, good. We're seeing something. I'm gonna go back to biomass and see if it showed up. We have a few things. Yeah, it's interesting to see the transportation costs. And then we heard from Riley from Senator Hurd's office about some transportation legislation they were moving through related to timber trucking. So it's good to see some connection there. Okay, I'm just gonna move on a little bit. We can look at what people entered and then we can move on to the next agenda item. Seems like people support or in favor of continuing to support Senate Bill 5. And then the last slide, if anyone has any thoughts or feedback on the utilities concept, we know this one's complex and that Julie's not here. We also know that there is a utilities committee within the Fire Commission, and Katie Lubdinsky and I have talked about making sure that there's collaboration and crossover there. Okay, well, I'll stop screen sharing and I'll make sure that this survey is sent out so that people have a chance to. Oh, we just got one comment. Will the Public Utilities Commission need to weigh in? That's a great question. I'm sure when we do stakeholdering, we would bring people in. I don't think anything would move too far hopefully without the appropriate voices.
Okay, Courtney, anything else
No, that's all.
that we got covered? Okay, great. Next up, we have Katie Lobozinski from DFPC. Good to see you, Katie. And we'll give an update on prescribed fire subcommittee.
Thanks, Dan. And thanks for the invite. I'm happy to be here. So just as a quick refresher, the Fire Commission was started in 2019, and it's kind of it's similar to the Forest Health Council, but we focus on issues faced by the Colorado Fire Service. And one of our big focal points over the past few years has been prescribed fire. Our prescribed fire subcommittee published this past year a statewide strategy for prescribed fire on non-federal lands. And now that group, which is comprised of some of our Fire Commission members, but mostly a lot of external SMEs, they're working to implement some of the strategies in that statewide strategy. So we have a lot of concurrent projects, but I am just going to highlight a few that are, I guess, really taking precedence at this moment. One is tracking the claims fund implementation. So Senate bill this past year created a claims fund for prescribed burners, and it also is working to figure out reciprocity of prescribed burners coming from other states, whether they can burn here as well. And part of the way that DFPC is working to implement this is by creating a portal. So hopefully this will be a sort of centralized place for people who want to do prescribed burns around the state to access resources and submit their burn plans and see burn projects that are going on all around. The rollout of that project is going to be throughout this year and the first half of 2027. So our subcommittee is keeping a strong eye on that project, and we are going to provide input in each and every way that we can to make sure that it aligns with the statewide strategy. Another project we have going on is mapping agency private land burn processes. So we're taking a look at how DFPC and other agencies partner with other organizations to do burns, and we're trying to identify very specific liability hurdles there that we can address through legislative and administrative recommendations. That's a project that's being led by Becca Samolsky at FACO, with also a lot of input from the Nature Conservancy and the Ember Alliance. A third project that we're focused on right now is expanding certified burner trainings. So CCB and RXB trainings. Kristen Leger at the Ember Alliance is leading this project. She hosts a lot of slash building and burning workshops with private landowners. These are hands-on workshops to teach people how to build piles, and they talk a lot about the CCB trainings in those workshops. So we're thinking this might be an opportunity to expand the offerings that we can give to get more people trained to put more fire on the ground. Fourth project is integrating smoke permit and burn permit processes. This project's really about resource sharing. There are a lot of different rules across the state about smoke permit processes, county by county, jurisdiction by jurisdiction, and we're really trying to gather the resources and provide them in a centralized and efficient way to folks so they're not getting slapped with fines or burning in ways that is not good within the context of their jurisdiction. One thing that we are thinking about with this project is that there are some places in Colorado where these processes actually work really well. So we want to make sure that when we're thinking about maybe centralizing these resources, we don't want to introduce additional hurdles for communities in Colorado that already have really good systems in place. That project's being led by Chuck Lanou at DFPC. And then finally, project I wanted to flag is the Forest Improvement Districts project. This is actually its own subcommittee within the Fire Commission. Basically, it's a special district idea that was established in statute in 2007 that enables communities to form a special district to do forest improvement projects, which includes wildfire mitigation work. But no communities have taken that idea forth since the legislation was passed. So we're trying to see what hurdles may exist for communities to do that, and if there are changes that we can make, whether they be administrative or legislative, to make that easier or more appealing, then we're gonna try and address those. And Allison's involved in that project, as well as the State Forest Service and the Special Districts Association. So those are some of the projects that we're working on right now. That subcommittee meets about once a month, and our next meeting will be Thursday, February 26th from 9 to 10:30. So if you're interested in joining, or you have any opinions about the project, we love to build bridges between our group and yours. So thank you again for listening. I'm happy to be here and happy to take any questions now or later.
Great. Thanks, Katie, for those updates. We appreciate that. Any questions regarding the work of the Prescribed Fire Subcommittee Council? Going once, going twice. Did you mention in the beginning, I don't recall, is the group looking into like liability issues, like legislative liability? Did you mention that in the beginning? Did I hear that?
Yeah, that's one of our focus areas.
Yeah. I remember when I was a legislator, that was definitely a topic that a lot of folks wanted to focus on. Yeah, Amy?
Thank you, Director Gibbs. I was slow to find my raise hand button. Thank you, Katie. I had a question on the Forest Improvement District Subcommittee. What is the timeline and process for providing the recommendations or outputs of that committee? I have heard lots of discussion about that topic across the state. I think there's a lot of interest in some of the findings of that group, and just curious to hear more about next steps.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for your question, Amy. I'm actually going to speak a little bit more about like how our subcommittee timelines work in a presentation after lunch that Courtney asked me to give, but just specifically for this project. The group is new, but it's working pretty quickly. So I imagine that we'll be making some recommendations within the next 6 months. August is when the Fire Commission releases its annual report, so that's when we publish most of our recommendations, and we're probably gonna shoot for that with that project.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was the author of that bill that gave enabling legislation. I can't remember what year it was, but the idea was to mimic, like school district boards or fire districts and figure out that localized funding component. And to my knowledge, there was one community, it was like Western Boulder County, that really put it to the ballot, and it went down. It was my understanding that a lot of the different fire districts, there's like Western Boulder County, and some of you know this maybe better than me, but there's like enormous amount of different fire districts, like all within a pretty small geographical area. And there was a big concern by some of the fire districts on like how the money would be allocated. And I think a lot of the fire chiefs wanted to have more oversight, I would say. And is that, I'm looking at Christina and Katie and others, is that accurate? So I was always disappointed because I was like, hey, it'd be great to showcase like you introduce a bill and you want it to be like worthwhile, right? And I was always scratching my head thinking like, is there going to be another community that would, look at developing something like this? But yeah, anyone have anything else? Commissioner Shaq McNally?
Yeah, this was a discussion about a year and a half ago that county commissioners, when it first started being brought up by a commissioner who had thought, well, hey, there's a state statute that no one's ever used, and it could be an opportunity. And as we were all talking, they were looking at the structure of who was all on there, and I think some of the things that I heard right away was, well, we're already doing that, and we would only have one seat, and it feels like another layer of government. And folks like my county, and I'm not against it, I think this is a solution that we should add another tool to the toolbox, especially for those communities that don't have some of the things like my county has, where we have over 300 taxing districts. And so add another special district. People always think the county brings we get all this money and it's all coming to the county. But when you look at your tax bill, the county is a small, tiny little piece, and the rest of the taxing districts make up the most. And so we've done some polling on that and trying to educate, and I can show you that. We have a Budget Explorer thing on our website that shows all the different breakouts for folks, and people are stunned to hear of all the different taxing districts. And every year that creates a lot for our assessors to certify all those, and then we have as commissioners have to vote to certify those. And I think that's some of the things I've heard is, having another taxing entity and having, how is the accountability, especially when you have to work across jurisdictions with sheriffs and fire districts, and working through, who has a good voice. And so I just wanted to give you some of that feedback, because that was almost immediate feedback in that conversation. And I know one of those was a Boulder County commissioner, and they had just passed their fire tax. So they were kind of just really kind of like, oh, we already have this. But I do think at this point, all ideas and any and all funding together, coming together is really a good strategy to work together, because we need all of it. And as I said, we're working and looking at a local funding measure. But I do think the makeup and the makeup and participation of who's on the board and how many people, there's that sweet spot. If I just got done chairing and I've done it for 2 years, I stepped down last night of a urban renewal authority. There's 13 people from different taxing entities. One is the city council, and it is hard to get all of them to agree. And since one group has more power, the city has a little more representation than the other 4 taxing districts. It's not representative. It's kind of weighted. So I think those are some of the things that we've been hearing, or I've been hearing, is that makeup of the council or the board is maybe something that some folks are looking at. And I don't know where those conversations at, but I just wanted to provide that feedback. If you don't know or know a county commissioner or hang out with a county commissioner, I'm sure Director Gibbs knows we can't stop talking policy or stuff. We even try to go out and do a museum or have a brunch. I'm going to DC in a couple of weeks for the national conference. And you can't even look at a street or a trailhead or anything while thinking, oh, I see how they did that. You think about it in terms of policy and maintenance and governance. And so we just talk stuff like this all the time. So I just wanted to share some of that feedback from even 2 years ago to today, and just some of the conversations I've been, because I'm literally every day in meetings talking about funding and solving all of that and where we go. And Katie, I'm sorry I missed the meeting. It just, I need to find a way to just open up areas of my schedule, but I do have a toolbox created for helping with the education piece, but I had some staff help there. But anyway, I just wanted to share that, and thanks for letting me share. I do think we have to look at this as all hands on deck, and all avenues of support should be welcomed and being partnered together. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Christina.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I think I can speak just like from a resident, like a personal standpoint, but also professional. Yeah, the complexity is tough. I don't think it's insurmountable. I think the concept is a good one in that I think the messaging has to be that by combining these fire protection districts, you get kind of a greater financial benefit. The problem is that, and I've seen this just being a Storm Mountain resident, is that the residents want to pay into something smaller on their scale, like their neighborhood, their specific fire district. And so if it expands and they feel like their money is going towards a greater area that isn't protecting their area of interest, that's where it fails. And so I think it's really trying to message that it's not like you're sending your money to another area that's not protecting your neighborhood. It's really bolstering a bigger pot for, yes, a larger area. So it's the saying, which I'm terrible at remembering sayings, like the one ship raises, they all do, or something like that. I don't know. That's kind of the messaging that I think it would take to pass something like that. We've seen this in the Upper South Platte partnership too, where there's a lot of fire protection districts that were engaged, and I think that they tried to consolidate for more resources, and it also failed. So I've seen the complexity, and I appreciate, Dan, that you shared your perspective on that and some of those challenges. They are real. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Let's see. Any other questions for Katie? And you're going to join us later on in the afternoon too?
I am, yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, if none, thanks so much. Thanks for these updates. And it looks like somehow we are on time. I don't know how that happened. So yeah, let's take, how does 30 minutes sound for lunch? And we come back at 12:30 and then we're like on time. Does that sound good? Okay, see you all at 12:30. Thanks. I think we're probably all right to go, right? Courtney, is that we're good?
Yes, we're good to go.
Okay, great. So next, we have Katie McGrath Novak, who is the chair of the Leveraging Resources Committee. Thanks so much, Katie, for stepping up to be in that leadership role for that committee. The floor is yours to give us an update on what's going on.
Awesome. Thank you. I want to start off with a big thank you to Amy Moyer. She took over as chair in the second half of 2025 while I was out on maternity leave. So thank you so much for stepping up. And she did a really good job of leading the committee and set us off, I think, on a really solid path for 2026. So I'll start off with a little bit of refresher and then give an update on what we've been up to the past couple months. So, if you recall from the last meeting of 2025, we had been having a bunch of presentations to dig into 4 different pain points that we have identified that we have found people face when applying for funding. And so our 4 pain points that we keep coming back to are capacity, match requirements, timelines, lag, and funding for earlier stages of readiness. And so throughout 2025, we were having a bunch of presentations from funders to hear about ways that their different funding programs have addressed one or more of those pain points. And then our goal was to take all of that information and come up with recommendations for how the state can be ready for changes coming and address some of those pain points in the future. So, um, let's see. So that was kind of where we were at the end of last year. And then this year we compiled some of the key takeaways from all the presentations that we had heard, kind of sorted them out into here's different key takeaways by pain point, and then wrote up some draft recommendations informed by those presentations that we heard. So then just last month, we did an activity to prioritize those recommendations. And we ended up coming up with 3 that the committee thought were the most relevant and timely right now to address. So I'm going to, and I can put these in the chat after I'm done talking as well, but I'll read off the 3 recommendations as they stand right now. And I liked the language that the legislative committee used around having concepts, because right now these recommendations are still pretty broad brush. They definitely need a deep dive and some subject matter experts to help us build them out into something more tangible. But this is where the recommendations stand so far. So the first one came from the timelines lag pain point, which is to identify and remove barriers regarding the unused authorization in the state revolving loan program that allows for financing related to forest health. The second recommendation came from the capacity related pain point, which is so the second recommendation is sustained investment in local wood processing and workforce development. And one of the ideas we had here is a viable wood stock study. And I have a note, I'm not a subject matter expert in this, but I have a note that mills and processors need proof of wood stock in order to get loans and certain grants. And so some sort of viable wood stock study there could be a recommendation. And again, that one came from the capacity pain point. And then the third one also came from our capacity pain point, which is to allow or expand the ability for state programs, grant programs to cover capacity. And we want to note this is not just administrative capacity, but various types of capacity. So administrative, technical expertise, communications, et cetera. And we note that the Forest Resilience Planning Guide can point to these different types of capacity, at what point these different types of capacity might be needed, indicators of readiness, possible outcomes, et cetera, to help the state identify and track success of these types of resources. So again, I'll put those in the chat momentarily, but those are our 3 kind of broad brush recommendations, and we feel like these are really important. We've put a lot of work into identifying which direction we want this committee to go and coming up with those recommendations.
And so, but again, each one needs a pretty deep dive. And as a really small committee covering the broad topic of leveraging resources, we know that we'll need more subject matter expertise. So we'll talk about some ideas for that in our next agenda item, but also I just want to extend an invite if you are interested in helping us work toward any of these recommendations, whether it be one of them or all of them, ideally, please let me know. We could use more people on our committee to help us work towards some of these objectives. I think that is, oh, and then I just have, before I open up to questions, as kind of a side update, we also have added in a standing update from the work group, the WWIRC, which we've talked about in the full council, as well as I know the legislative committee has been keeping up with them. So we just kind of put that on the agenda to keep that dialogue going and keep up with what they're working on. And then we're always continuing to talk about how we can operationalize and institutionalize the Forest Resilience Planning Guide, which continues to be one of our big projects that we've worked on. So first, I want to see if Amy Moyer has anything to add or adjust to what I have shared, and then we can open up to questions or discussion.
No, thank you so much, Katie. The only piece I would add is I think as we've been going through this process and fine-tuning recommendations and some next steps for this committee, it's really helped us think through some of the process standpoints and how the committees interact and how this Forest Health Council has evolved since its creation and revival, I guess we could say, in 2021. And so Katie alluded to this, but I think we have some good recommendations to add to the next discussion on the agenda of exploring both the committee structure for the council and how the committees interact with each other. So thanks, Katie.
Great. Thanks so much, Katie. And Amy, thanks so much for stepping up to help chair and co-chair as well when Katie couldn't be there. Any questions? Well, I think this ties in nicely to our next discussion point. We want to have a discussion on committee structure. And as you know, we have two main committees that we have, and our committees have done really tremendous work. We've seen great products of the work, including like the Forest Resiliency Guide and Senate Bill 23-05. The legislative breakfast was a huge success as well. But we're also getting interested in really getting more people involved. We want to support kind of efficiency of what we do as well, and really excited to have Katie Lobowinski with us again to kind of have her share the structure of the Fire Commission, some of the subcommittees they have, kind of what works for them, what doesn't, and how we can work really collaboratively together, and make sure we're not we're doing our work, but we're collaborating, and everyone kind of is aware of the good work that's being done collaboratively together. So so we really wanted to kind of open this up, and I don't know, Katie, if you want to, do I kick it off to you next, or Allison or Courtney to kind of help get the conversation going?
Yeah, I can get into it. I have actually like 3 slides if it's all right if I share
Yeah.
my screen. Okay. Here we go. You see that?
Yeah.
Awesome. So, Courtney, did you want to say anything before I explain, or you good?
I think Dan did a good intro. I think we just wanted to take this opportunity to learn from other councils or commissions how they run and operate and are structured to be able to, yeah, I kind of want to say like be inspired or to learn more about what's working for other people and how we can continue to improve our processes.
Awesome. Yeah, Courtney asked me to speak a little bit today about the structure of the Fire Commission, because our commission has a lot of the same research and policy goals as the Forest Health Council, but it's structured differently. So Courtney and I meet every once in a while, and it's kind of interesting to see what works for each of our groups and what we can learn from each other. So I'm just gonna give a quick overview of our commission and then explain how our subcommittees work and how that differs from the Forest Health Council, and then just give a quick example of one of our subcommittee projects so that you can kind of get your head around our workflow. So I said some of this earlier. This is going to be really quick, but Fire Commission established in 2019 to look at all issues that the Colorado Fire Service faces. We have 24 voting members and 8 non-voting members. And we meet once a quarter, but our subcommittees meet independently depending on the pace of their projects. And I also just wanted to flag that Senate bill in 2019 funded an administrator position for the commission. So that's my job, and that is also a difference between the Fire Commission and the Forest Health Council. Our main output is an annual report in August, but we do sometimes release recommendations outside of that. As far as our subcommittee structure, the main difference between the Forest Health Council and the Fire Commission subcommittees is that our subcommittees are based around focus areas of study. The general structure of the Fire Commission is based on the Colorado Commission of Criminal and Juvenile Justice, which actually is no longer in existence. It was sundowned, but if you're interested in looking at like where the idea of our structure came from, it's from that prior commission. So essentially, during discussions at Fire Commission meetings, we have conversations that converge on priority issues, and the Fire Commission during those meetings votes to stand up subcommittees to address specific focus areas. So currently the subcommittees that we have active in the Fire Commission are prescribed fire, insurance, power grid and utilities, co-fire, the State Fire Marshal's Office subcommittee, and then a Forest Improvement Special Districts subcommittee. The subcommittees typically have 2 co-chairs, at least one of whom is a commission member. But most of the members of the subcommittees are not commission members. They're subject matter experts that we bring in to weigh in on subjects. The composition of the subcommittees is at the co-chair's discretion and really depends on who needs to be at the table for a given subject area. And we also, within the subcommittees, sometimes form task forces to focus on more targeted projects. So when a new subcommittee is set up, they meet and they set a vision and objectives for this group. And the idea is that the subcommittee will exist until that project is completed, at which point the commission will vote to stand down the subcommittee. And at our quarterly meetings, representatives of each subcommittee report on the projects of their groups. They receive feedback from the full commission and then incorporate it to continue working on their projects between the quarterly meetings. So ultimately, the subcommittees research and develop the bulk of Fire Commission recommendations, and these are administrative and legislative in nature. And they pass the recommendations on to the full commission at the quarterly meetings, and then the commission will vote to adopt them and advance them. So I'm going to finish with a quick example of one project we have going on, and that is within our Power Grid and Utilities subcommittee, we are working to propose minimum standards for utilities wildfire mitigation plans. So at our meeting in early 2025, the commission voted to stand up a Power Grid and Utilities subcommittee because utilities was a constant subject of focus in commission conversations, as it sounds like it has been in Forest Health Council conversations too. Then the chair and vice chair of the Fire Commission selected co-chairs for this subcommittee, who happen to be on the Fire Commission are representative of electric utilities and are representative of emergency managers. So those are the 2 people who are leading this project. And then they in turn recruited all the people that they felt needed to be at the table for this conversation. So we have representatives of the Colorado State Forest Service, DFPC, and then all representatives from all kinds of utilities companies from rural co-ops up to Excel. The group met to set a vision and objectives and ultimately decided to focus on this specific project, which is around wildfire mitigation plans that utilities use to articulate and guide their wildfire mitigation work. The subcommittee has been meeting about once a month on this project, but a draft bill came out of the ether a couple months ago around the same subject, and at that point, the subcommittee decided to increase the pace of their project. So this just kind of goes to show how our subcommittees move at their own pace and change and adapt depending on whatever happens to be going on in the state and in the legislative process. And yeah, I'll just finish by saying that I feel like the strength of the Fire Commission structure is that it allows focus to shift between subjects pretty easily, and it also allows us to bring in key stakeholders and do really specific research around areas of study. But I think there are also a lot of strengths to the structure of the Forest Health Council. There's pros and cons to both, but I just wanted to share what we got going on in our shop, and I hope it's useful to y'all as a group as you think about what might work best for your objectives. So thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for that presentation. And are there any questions for Katie? And I know that Allison and Courtney will help kind of guide us through a discussion that it may come back to you, Katie, possibly on any questions and follow-up. So Allison, Courtney, let me turn it over to you both to kind of help facilitate the next discussion on this.
Dan, it looks like Katie McNovak has her hand up
Okay.
too.
Yeah.
Sorry. I was just wondering, I know that the Fire Commission has like paid capacity. So just in terms of the capacity to manage that, what does that look like? Like, Katie, is this your full-time job, or like how many other people are you bringing in to help facilitate those committees and stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is my full-time, the commission is my full-time job, and that does really allow us to have a wide bandwidth for our projects. We also bring in a facilitator for our quarterly meetings, so there's small price tag there. And I think that, yeah, between those two, it allows us to accomplish the work that we want to do.
Okay, Lynn is up next.
Thank you. Thanks, Katie, for that presentation. I just wanted to comment on the focus on mitigation standards for utilities. That's really important to the insurance industry. So we do appreciate your commission's focus on that. I think it will make for a more resilient state overall.
Thanks for the comment, Lynn. If you're interested in joining that group, feel free to reach out.
Okay.
Great, Courtney.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. My question is about specific projects within the subcommittees. When you were giving an update on the prescribed fire subcommittee earlier in the meeting, I think you mentioned 3 different projects that they were doing, and each project had a lead, and those leads weren't you. Can you talk about how members of the subcommittees maybe like will pick up and lead a project? And is that something that one person will say, I want to see this happen, or the committee decides they want to see it happen, and then someone volunteers, or how are the projects divvied up?
Yeah, that's a good question. Those would be examples of task forces. So because that's such a huge project, we decided we needed to break it up and assign leads. And the ultimate decision of who's leading those is up to the co-chairs of the subcommittee. But generally, there's someone that seems most suited for any given subject, just depending on how excited they are, how much specific knowledge they have. So that's usually who we tap to step in. It also depends on the capacity of the individual members, just who's willing to do this and who's able to do this.
Great. Amy Moyer.
Thanks, Katie. I had a somewhat similar question of how do you balance on the subcommittees people that are on the fire commission, and sounds like you rely on membership of experts related to the specific topic that aren't on the commission. How does that balance and function work?
It's definitely really important to have the commission represented on the subcommittees because they understand not only the conversations that happen during the quarterly meetings, but also how the flow of discussion moves between subcommittees and the fire commission meetings. And they also can serve as point people to report out on, the more specific subcommittee meetings within the quarterly meetings. So I would say we have between 2 and 5 commission members on each subcommittee, and I think the more the better, but just depending on what the focus is and how many people need to be brought in, we can't have tons and tons of commission members on each subcommittee, but it works really well as long as the commission members represented on the subcommittees are motivated and interested in the subject itself. Did that answer your question?
It did, and I imagine this varies if you have 2 to 5 commission members, how many either outside experts or other interested parties do you typically have on a subcommittee if there's even a standard range?
Right, that's a really good question. That also depends on the nature of the project that the group is doing. Like the prescribed fire subcommittee at some point was like 40 people.
Okay.
Which is pushing too many for sure. There's an ideal number of people to have a solid, productive discussion, which I think I would say tends to fall between 10 and 20 because some folks aren't going to show up, and you just want to make sure that everyone can express their opinions. It's difficult in a digital world. But yeah, it depends. Our subcommittees range from like 6 people to 40.
Have you had any discussions on, have any of the members been like, okay, we need a subcommittee on this and that, and are you ever like this or Mike Morgan or Sam Hilke, like too many subcommittees, or do you think you have like the sweet spot right now, I guess, too?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a lot for sure at times, but like I said earlier, it's my full-time job, so I have a lot of bandwidth for that. There are definitely some projects that commission members will propose, and then you kind of see everyone's not really on board with it, or it's not the right time for that to come into being yet. So yeah, I feel like we're at a good spot now with around 7 subcommittees. So.
And then historically, those subcommittees have met for like a year or so, and some are maybe like kind of standing that will go indefinitely, possibly.
Yeah, the prescribed fire subcommittee's been around for like 4 years now, so that's our longest running one. But I think the general lifespan is 1 to 2 years.
Okay. Christina.
You with the subcommittees, Katie, I know I'm part of the utility one, and it seems like they're working towards like some kind of deliverable. And I think we have some of that with like leveraging resources and the legislative committee working on like something tangible. And I'm curious, with the subcommittees, are they always working on some kind of like deliverable, or are some just information sharing, and kind of what the goals are of those subcommittees? Thanks.
That's a good question. I mean, according to the statute, the deliverable of the subcommittees and the commission itself is supposed to be, really specifically researched and presented recommendations that go into the annual report. We do though stray from that at times to produce resources that are needed by the state and local communities, because sometimes it's like, well, we have the right folks in the room, and this resource should exist. And if we're not going to do it, no one else is going to do it. So we do kind of expand our work a little bit at times. But generally, it's the recommendations that are our deliverables.
Yeah, Katie.
Speaking of recommendations, are you guys, as the Fire Commission, constrained at all to like the recommendations that you can make? I know our legislative committee, I think, typically shoots for 5 recommendations to give to the Wildfire Matters Review Committee. And one of the challenges that the Leveraging Resources Committee has encountered is like, can we make a legislative recommendation? Can we make, like what kind of recommendations can we make? And then if we make a legislative recommendation, are we taking one of the 5 slots? So I'm curious, like, do you guys have a certain number that you're shooting for or something? Are you constrained at all?
We aren't constrained, but I think that's actually one of the strengths of the Forest Health Councils. You have a very clear and direct relationship with the legislators that allows you to think more technically about those decisions. Whereas I think we're a little bit more we're a little bit further from that arena, so we just kind of recommend whatever we want, and some of them go and some of them don't. But yeah, we had like 12 last cycle, 12 recommendations. So
Wow.
How many got picked up?
That's a lot.
it's hard to say because they're not all legislative. I would say like 3 of them are doing well. But we all know the funding situation the state's in, so it's a challenge.
Yeah. Courtney. Oh, you're on mute.
Okay, thank you. Katie, you said that not all of the recommendations were legislative. Can you talk about the other types of recommendations that you made and who they're addressed to?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I'll give an example. Our insurance subcommittee is thinking a lot about the wildfire resiliency code that is being adopted at a state level right now. So we had a recommendation from the insurance subcommittee kind of around strategic messaging for that project. So what we've been doing over the past months to kind of advance that recommendation that we made is we have been having a lot of conversations with IBHS, which let me try and get the acronym, the Institute for Business and Home Safety. Someone can correct me if that's not right. But they've kind of come on board and are helping us do a research project. They're funding a research project in Colorado to demonstrate like the actual costs of building to this new wildfire resiliency code versus building to a different standard, because there's a lot of misinformation around maybe what that will actually cost. So that's an example of, I guess, a recommendation we made that's not legislative, that is sort of bringing in outside partners. Yeah.
Okay. Other questions? And with your subcommittees, you normally try to have them in place for like a year. Is that accurate? Or maybe some would be even shorter if depending on the charge of it.
Yeah, definitely depends. 6 months to 2 or 3 years. That's why I think when the subcommittees first stood up, there's a really focused discussion about, okay, what is the vision of this subcommittee, and here's XYZ, our objectives, because that will determine when the subcommittee should be stood down. So the commission will look at that and say, looks good, and then that is what will guide the project and determine whenever it's finished.
Yeah, interesting. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, if and maybe members will have ideas, but just thinking, I'm sure there's a lot of topics that overlap, right, with the Fire Commission and the Forest Health. And if we should explore subcommittees that are just combined, with us. Like looking at our federal partners, I feel like, daily almost there's like a weight on my shoulders and my heart on kind of like the landscape of like the uncertainty with my brothers and sisters at the U.S. Forest Service, the BLM, Bureau of Reclamation, a lot of the different federal entities that do such great work that to me, it kind of seems like when I meet with some of the higher ups nationally, it's like, okay, you care about these lands or these topics. Well, here you go, Dan, and I don't know if I'm explaining this right, but like almost this, potential uncertainty of like federal funding partners and work on the ground. And we have such great collaboration with U.S. Forest Service on like, our shared stewardship MOU that we have. And I was going to share some exciting news in my update, but I'll just share it with you all now. We signed the shared stewardship MOU with the Bureau of Land Management just a couple of weeks ago, and that's been in the works for years. And I'm really excited about that because that really encompasses so much of how we can work together on forest health, but outdoor recreation, and I mean, you name it. But I just think that could be a topic of, and I'm looking at the county commissioners that are here too. It's kind of like just the uncertainty that maybe that I feel on my shoulders and my heart that trickles to a lot of different levels of government. That could be something that we all care about, which I'm pretty convinced it is. Yeah, Nina, thanks for your comment. Yeah, online. Yeah. But yeah, maybe we could explore. We don't have to decide now, but maybe where that energy of both the commissions can collaborate and stuff. And I know there's folks, like myself, I'm on both, too. So we do have like an overlap, and I can't be there. Allison's there for me. But I think there are just a lot of opportunities that we can, plan and work together. Courtney?
Hi there. I'll just kind of add a plus to that idea. I really like the idea of more joint committees. I imagine we will never, well, I won't say never. It would be challenging to have the full commission and the full council get together to create a recommendation, but I think these committees would be a really wonderful way to have members from each group with expertise putting together joint recommendations. So I'll put a note to keep bringing that up in the discussion today.
Mm-hmm. Vaughn?
Hey, Dan, thanks. Yeah, just a thought on this topic. And obviously we all know there's so much overlap and integration with these two groups. I think one thing to consider is, when one of the groups, has a subcommittee that's more specific on their stuff, make sure there's some representatives on that subcommittee. And then, so there might still be some separate ones, but then when we truly have a subcommittee, that needs a lot of focus, a lot of SMEs and stuff, then maybe in some cases there are joint subcommittees for, that have strong representation from both groups, kind of like we did with the Prescribed Fire Council. So I think the balance there. And then again, yeah, that, as Dan and a few others, the Fire Commission was very successful in its early years to getting recommendations implemented. And I think it was in part because we were tackling low-hanging fruit that, was what kind of widely accepted. And frankly, with the state budgets were in a lot better shape. But now with as we're dealing with more difficult issues and tighter budgets, I think recommendations from both sides obviously are gonna help us out. So just a few comments from my standpoint.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Vaughn. Thank you. Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to echo Vaughn's comments. I do see a lot of value in having some tough subjects like the biomass, right? It'd be great to have some subject matter experts constantly in the room. We have some to be able to kind of tease out more ideas. And I think I've used an report about the workforce concept that we were trying to work through the Forest Health Council. And we were aware that, the fire commission had asked the school district to, have this class and this certification, and it was successful. Poor School District graduated 40 people. And one, I think, walked right out of class into becoming a wildland firefighter for a sheriff's department, and the other ones went on to mitigation crews and got some experience. And I think that was something we were also trying to expand, workforce development. And so I use that as an example that maybe if we both saw those similar issues and they found a funding to come through the school districts and through a different funding source, how we can make each other aware of what we're both trying to do. And maybe if we had known even earlier now when they're trying to keep that funding, it's something that we could come together and get behind those efforts to keep that funding and that programming going. And so I do see like that as an example of having that joint subcommittees or working together on some of those would be very helpful. I do think I agree, again, echoing Yvonne's comments, the conditions now are different than we've had in a while. And coming out of the pandemic, and we had some American Rescue Plan dollars that were helping with getting some things done, and we were able to do more. But the reality is we're in I always call it the Hunger Games, and maybe we need to make our coalition come together to help have a strong united voice for looking for making sure these efforts need to have the attention and innovative funding solutions going forward. We all know there's a cost of doing nothing, great cost. And there's also even for, as we all know, even the investments have huge returns. And so I do think there's some good things here to tease out and also still keep kind of the two separate council and commission separate, focusing on their areas and their missions. But there's a lot of areas I think that we could crosswalk and work together on. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Vaughn, is that hand up from before, or is that a new comment?
From before, sorry.
Oh, okay, no problem. Hey, Katie and Vaughn, I can't remember, I don't recall, does the fire commission have like a day at the Capitol, like breakfast, kind of like what we did this year?
No, they don't.
No, okay. Yeah, and that potentially could be something that we could work together on in the future. We could explore what that would look
Yeah, I
like.
think they would love that.
Yeah. Okay, let me turn it over to Allison. I think you're gonna continue our dialogue on this.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Before I pass it over to Courtney, this has been such a great back and forth, and thank you so much, Katie, for presenting and also just engaging in this deeper discussion. What I want to share and make sure we all know is today we are merely having a discussion as a council, and so we do not need to make any changes to our structure today. This is a deeper, we're going to now go into a deeper dive that Courtney is going to facilitate based off of some of the things we've heard from Katie and just some other recommendations that we've also heard. So we want to continue to hear your voices as we now really hone back in to the Forest Health Council. Go ahead, Courtney.
Thanks, Allison. Thanks, Katie. Thanks, everyone. It's helpful to hear what the Fire Commission is doing, and I want to pose some ideas, pose some questions, and then we can have a little time for discussion. And I have some questions for you all about how you want to be engaged, how you want to work. And then perhaps the next step would be staff could write up some proposals, and at the next meeting there could be more discussion. And if we wanted to do anything differently, we could consider it at the next meeting. So no need to vote, as Allison said, but we're trying to gather information on what you all want today. So I think first, the goals of why this has come up, and it's actually come up in a few different places organically. I think a few goals are: we want the council to be doing meaningful work, to influence forest health management, to engage with policymakers, to provide strong recommendations. We also want council members to feel engaged, and we want you to feel as though you have an opportunity to use your expertise fully. And so if folks here wanted to be involved in more than just the quarterly meetings, maybe the two committees that are operating right now don't call to you, we want to know, part of this conversation is how would council members who don't currently serve on committees or who do, how could you feel like your expertise is being utilized more fully? So those are some of the goals for the conversation. I want to go into the idea of having these subject matter groups. They could be called committees, they could be called subcommittees, they could be called working groups. And I think instead of getting into the nuance of the name, for now, I want to call them maybe subject matter groups, because right now what the Forest Health Council seems to have is committees that are structured on processes. So a committee to create legislative recommendations, a committee to investigate leveraging resources and provide suggestions, which is a little more subject matter. But I think what we're discussing today a little bit is really diving into subject matter topics, and those could include the 30-year vision themes. You know, we have mindset and culture shift, we have diverse and consistent funding. It could be subjects that come out of our statutory duties. You know, we have a long list of statutory duties, or it could be these more specific items that the committees themselves have been identifying over time. Katie listed a few of the topics that the Leveraging Resources Committee is uncovering, they are noticing that these topics need a lot of in-depth investigation, and the Legislative Committee as well is uncovering topics that could use a 6-month, 8-month, 1-year deep dive. So I'm wanting to hear from you all about the idea of these subject matter groups. They could include outside membership, and I think there is another conversation about how this fits into the current structure. So a few options is, you know, we could keep both committees as we have them, and these subject matter groups are additional and they kind of report up to the committees. We could use these subject matter groups, to advise the committees. We could have the current committees meet only for a small period of time. Perhaps the Legislative Committee meets right before the legislative session and it doesn't meet for the rest of the year, or these groups could replace the committees. There's lots of options and we're not trying to dictate what happens. I'm wanting to pass it over to the group to hear from you all what works for you. I do want to have a little plug that staff capacity is more limited in the Forest Health Council, but I do think there's opportunities for tools like AI to take meeting notes, and you know, we can post the recordings, committee. So there's some limiting factors, but I also think there's opportunities for the members to be engaged in different ways and for maybe us to use technology to support these groups. So my questions for you all, I'm wanting to open it back up, is what did you hear from Katie's presentation that you liked and you're interested in exploring? Would any of you all that are not currently in committees be more inclined to join a group if it had a subject matter focus than a process focus? How can we do more joint work with the Fire Commission? And then just in general, what do you all think about these other opportunities? Is this something we should look into more? And if so, which avenues are you drawn to? And that was a lot. So I can move through it more slowly too if needed. But sounds like Mark, you have a
Yes. I keep hearing about lack of funding and everything, and this outside thing that we don't control. And so that kind of makes us victims. So I'm looking for ways to contribute positively in spite of that fact. I think we have to move forward and get some work done. These common interest groups or committees, whatever you want to call them, are kind of appealing to me because there are specific subjects that reach across several boundaries, but they're very specific in the problem. For one that I feel very passionately about is we've got to deal with biomass in a reasonable way, how much we recover, how much we don't recover, what we do with it, what products we can be making out of it. And this crosses very much over like into the fire commission. I found their method of dealing with these subjects interesting because we have to get down to the details and be specific where we can actually make a difference. I feel there's a lot of, I still think there's a lot of existing regulations within the state that make it difficult to deal with biomass. So how those two tie together. And I listened very carefully early on in Katie's presentation about pile building. Pile building is a simple thing. If you're going to really burn piles to do the job and do it right, they were teaching classes in that. That lops over right into legislative regulations, and also our partners in the Federal Forest Service, I think, are pretty well committed, at least in the northern part of the state, that they're going to build piles and they're going to get good at them and they're going to burn them. And doing that efficiently and with the least amount of air pollution. And that also allows you to time it for weather. You know, a controlled burn or a prescribed burn is incredibly weather dependent, but large pile burning can be done with snow cover with virtually zero risk. And that ties back to the insurance basis or the relief for the burning, the legal standpoint of it. So these all tie in together, and to get not any more wordy here, but working on a site-specific problem wherever it leads is very appealing to me as a way to actually get something done.
Thank you, Mark. Amy, what do you think?
Yeah, thanks, Courtney. I thought I would just share some of my reflections having participated on the Leveraging Resources Committee since 2021. And I do think the capacity of both the committee and the staff that supports the committee is important to consider as part of this discussion of, especially for a Forest Health Council that has a primary goal and a great opportunity to have this connection of legislative recommendations to both the General Assembly and also to the current executive administration, really lends itself to the importance of the legislative committee. And so it's really hard in a volunteer capacity, one, to choose between the committees and figure out sort of where your expertise and your role is most valuable. And I think it has brought up some governance questions of how does the Leveraging Resource Committee bring forward recommendations, being mindful of administrative recommendations that especially would require resources from the departments is something that presents a challenge and needs strong consideration. And then, like Katie mentioned earlier, of how do you, when you have 5 recommendations, blend the perspectives of each committee. The legislative committee that's certainly aimed at coming up with those recommendations, but also the leveraging resources where there can be some overlap. So considering, I just appreciate this discussion of considering whether there's one broad steering committee or legislative committee that then develops these more focused task forces that are based on specific subjects or specific areas of exploration could make a lot of sense for this group. Just thinking about capacity from all sides, from both the committee members and the staff that supports this. And I think the Leveraging Resources Committee, like Katie had mentioned, you know, where that committee has gotten is starting to identify, here's a selection of recommendations that could benefit from some sort of strike force or task force or subject matter in-depth analysis that could lend itself to needing more expertise across the committee or more expertise of subject matter experts. So those are really just some of my reflections to add to the discussion. And I appreciate just being able to bring this topic up.
Thanks, Amy. I think that's really, an important part of the discussion is what power and what avenues of influence do each of the committees have. It sounds like in the Fire Commission, each committee, subcommittee is putting forth recommendations. It sounds like some of them are legislative, some of them are not. The audiences are very wide in terms of who the committees understand that they can reach out to, which I think is a little different than sometimes how we interpret our role. And so I'd be interested in uncovering if maybe we do have a wider audience than we think. What do you think, Katie?
Yeah, I'll just add my 2 cents. I think a lot of what I'm saying is going to echo what Mark and Amy have both already said. But yeah, I've been the committee chair of the Leveraging Resources Committee for probably over a year at this point. And I think the biggest challenge that I've faced is that like leveraging resources is such a broad topic. And so we've had these really amazing presentations, but it's meeting everyone at sort of different points, right? Like some of the people know a lot about what a viable woodstock study is. And then you have me who's like, what's a viable woodstock study? And trying to catch up. And if we're thinking about things that we're going to hand to either, the agency leadership or to legislature or whoever, um, I think there's a lot more opportunity for really good recommendations that are ready to just take off if people in the committee know, like, if we have just more of that subject matter expertise and can be a little bit more focused. I also wanted to just put out two of the most powerful things that I felt like I have done since being a part of the Forest Health Council. One was the Colorado Forest Resilience Planning Guide, which that was an effort of the Leveraging Resources Committee. But we ended up almost having like a subject matter task force where a few of us who were really into it met on the side and put extra time and effort into it. And that came out as this really awesome product that's ready to go. So I thought that was powerful. And then I also have been on the prescribed fire subcommittee of the Colorado Fire Commission. I'm not a fire commission member, but I joined that. And creating the prescribed fire strategy, the statewide strategy was, I felt like a really meaningful, powerful use of my time and something that I'm really proud to say that I was a part of. And so I think if we could do more of that as the Forest Health Council, that would be really good to see. And I think as the committee chair, it would help me to have more focused direction.
Thanks, Katie. So it sounds like from a committee perspective, at least a committee chair perspective, there'd be benefit from having more subject matter driven knowledge or recommendations coming up into the committees or coming up into the council. I heard Mark Morgan say that he would be in support of a subject matter group, especially around biomass, which is something he has a lot of expertise in. Other members of the council, those of you who are on committees, and especially also those of you who are not currently on committees, would you be interested, inclined to join a subject matter group for more of a specific project for a more limited period of time? Is that appealing to you? Would that change the way that you engage with the council? Are people interested in that? Mark?
One of the key items that you just mentioned there would be a limited or a specific amount of time. Get into the particular subject, develop our work, and get done with it to where it doesn't drag on and drag on and drag on. Let's get specific, get a product done, make a recommendation, and call it what you want, sunset it, end it, or whatever. But I think you would get more input if you knew that this wasn't a life sentence to do this. So.
Todd, what do you think?
I think yes, and that happens to me all the time. Yes, and I think pertinent to what Director Gibbs offered, which I really appreciate. given some of the limitations we're facing right now, if there's an opportunity for us to look to other folks within the organization who would be appropriate to participate in some cases, that would expand opportunities for us. So, even if they're not part of the official representation or membership here. So I think that would be maybe a caveat for me. Certainly, we could probably get more folks participating in that way if that was an option.
Yeah, that's really good to hear that specific caveat around capacity, and if other people in your organizations could be tapped to represent and be on the groups, that would make it easier. So that's good to hear, and I'll make sure to note that too.
Thank you.
I mean, before we wrap up, does anyone have anything else they want to add? Things that we could consider that haven't been suggested yet, or a few North Stars for us to keep pondering on in between now and our next council meeting. Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
I just want to thank everyone for a really great discussion. I think there's a lot of wonderful ideas and thoughts here. But I also want to just state for the Full Forest Health Council and the Leveraging Resources, which I also sit on, and the Legislative Council, there are a lot of folks that have put in a lot of time and effort, and we've really kind of been here all along the way. So I also want to give everyone a shout out for their work and their diligence and their perseverance, because we all obviously care about, we're all coming together over the same issues and feel strongly and passionate enough that we're willing to give so much time and talents around that. And I do think making sure, those voices and those efforts are valued, and adding some more perspectives to the conversation to spark some innovation or outside the box thinking is also a very valid and important step. So I just feel both are really important, and I do support a lot of these ideas, and think we're in a new and unique time, and I think we have to do what we can to do all we can to find some solutions together. Thank you.
Hi, can you guys hear me all right?
Yes.
All right, I'm seeing some nods. So I think that I really do appreciate all the comments that have been said before, and I generally agree with most of them. I'm still really new to the council, so there's still a lot for me to be kind of taking all in, drinking a lot from the fire hose. But it seems to me that there's also this fear and perception around making recommendations that would have any sort of fiscal implications, because we've been hammered and told so many times that anything with a fiscal note is dead on arrival at the state legislature, or making any type of recommendation in that way. And I can see that there's definitely capacity restraints with staff, and as well as with just like fiscal constraints that we're trying to navigate around. And I think for me, I think the most important thing that I want to note, and I think is a great product of the work that has been done, is the 30-year vision. And we know that by having resilient forests in Colorado will lead to all of these beneficial outcomes that will not have fiscal impacts, but we have to make those investments now. And so my position, I guess, would be that I'd like to see us, whether or not there's a fiscal attachment to it or anything, we make those recommendations, because we know at the end of the day that the benefit to improving or creating some of these solutions that are from the forest vision, it is going to benefit the state as a whole, and billions saved. And so I just think that we should make the recommendations regardless, and I think that, or recommendations to give us also the tools that we need to establish the work that needs to be done, which is also something that I think would benefit the council as a whole.
Thanks, Nina. Yeah, Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, I just want to kind of come back to what I mentioned earlier on like collaboration between the fire commission and the Forest Health Advisory Council, and also just like think about like the committees that we have now, and like the Leveraging Resources Committee, as some of you recall, that really came about when we had some serious federal funding that was just like landing on our lap. You know, we had the ARPA funds and we had the infrastructure fund, like all that, was kind of moving. It was like, how are we coordinating on this and making sure, we have the matching components and we're all in sync on getting money out the door and getting the right place, right location, right pace and scale. And now it's like this tsunami, as I mentioned earlier, of like the uncertainty of what's happening in Washington, D.C. and how it impacts Colorado, how it impacts local governments, state governments, nonprofits. I was in a meeting yesterday called I'm serve on this committee called the Natural Resources Trustee Board. So it's like, the Attorney General and the head of CDPHE and myself, and we look at natural resources damages and we can like levy fines and so forth. So if there's like an oil and gas truck, for example, that crashes into a river and we see there's fish kill and environmental stuff, we can go in and levy penalties. And then sometimes in those situations, we give a bunch of money to local communities or a region to deal with the aftermath of these environmental issues. And then they tie in with other nonprofits like a Trout Unlimited or whatever it may be. But our discussion yesterday, like it was kind of like, okay, we're working on these projects and we're waiting on B2E funds, which, looking at Amy Moyer, you're very familiar with B2E funds, but kind of a lot of money that potentially we need to get for Colorado that's hung up, but also other funding sources like land and water conservation funds that may or may not happen and so forth. So I almost feel like our leveraging committee, I think we're on the right track, but almost like retool it to also look at like the uncertainty at the federal level for personnel and funding and what we need to do. And I feel like that really ties into like Division of Fire Prevention and Control and, frankly, like everyone, right now. So I just want to throw that out there of figuring out like how we can partner and who can bring what to the table in this landscape we have where there's real like uncertainty with federal funding or partners.
Thanks, Dan. Let me see if I can tell what order these other hands went up in. Maybe Madeline and then Jody. And then I also want to pass it to you, Christina, to say, I know you said in your chat, maybe I'll let you answer this first. You think we should consider committee structure as we try to implement the 30-year vision. And I'm wondering if you have any consideration for that, like if there's anything in mind about committee structure, or just let's have a pin in it as we move forward.
I didn't know if you wanted to jump in first, Christina. But I raised my hand actually in response to Christina's comment in the chat. I think capacity is a very important consideration. And the way to maximize the capacity of the council to me is to have a similar structure to maybe the fire commission with a paid coordinator position. I think when we're asking a lot of the volunteers here, it's easier to have somebody go and do some homework outside of our committee meetings and full group meetings, and then have a full group react to it. I think it's easier to react to something than create something as a council. And so I'm curious if there was ever a recommendation made by the Forest Health Council to fund a coordinator position for the Forest Health Council, especially now that we have the 30-year vision and strategy. I think that's something strong to stand on there. And Commissioner Waters, very much take your point of the any recommendations with funding attachment might be dead at the legislature, but it will take some bold action, I think, to address the wildfire challenge that we're seeing. This is maybe one way that we could, accelerate our impact as a council.
Thanks, Madeline. I want to bold what you said and bold what Commissioner Waters said. I hear you saying, because this is a volunteer group, having higher internal capacity, staff capacity, you think could help make the council go further, allow the volunteer council members to do more with the limited time that they're spending, in the meetings if things were really prepped for them. And then Commissioner Waters, hearing what you're saying about not being afraid to ask for or make recommendations that have fiscal impacts, since the resources are truly needed and it's you see benefit in still putting forth those recommendations, even if there's a chance that they get declined. So I wanted to name that we did hear all that, and want to make sure the council heard that too. And yeah, Dan, curious what your thoughts are, or Allison, about funding. And it's such a tricky line, asking for recommendations with fiscal impacts or not, or asking for budget requests or not at this time.
I don't really have much to add, but the department, the DNR falls under all the same rules and regs that all the other state agencies have in terms of the guidance that we get from OSPB every year on, send us a budget that's, plus or minus whatever percentage, depending on what the budget looks like for the year. So we have to be consistent with that. If the commission felt strongly like, hey, we need X amount of money to do this program or that program, we should definitely take a hard look at that, because at the end of the day, it's up to really, legislators and the governor to potentially support it. But we definitely have different rules that we have to do, like within our departments, then that's kind of separate from the commissions, I would say.
That makes sense. Thanks, Dan. Vaughn, and then Mark.
A quick comment on that, and I think most folks know that, in that as we talk about that budget piece, obviously it's reality and it's something we all have to navigate again. But I would just reinforce, I think with this group, but I know with the Fire Commission, and we specifically set it up this way, that it is not a state agent, a state organization. It is a commission with folks from all over. So that group, if they say, hey, the A+ solution is to do this and it costs $1 bazillion, that group can speak to that to legislatures and the governors. And then, so like you said, Dan, some of our restrictions of state agencies, that comes into play, whether we can support the bills or whether it actually goes through. But again, I think use that cohesion of these groups to recommend the solutions that are needed for the issue, and then see if we can navigate it through the political process. So thanks.
Thanks, Vaughn. It's useful to hear how the Fire Commission views its position as separate and external in some ways to DFPC and its positions in its budget process. So that's helpful to know. Mark, what do you think? And you are on mute. Let's see.
I think the real question here is, how can this council be most helpful to you, the agencies? Is it better for us to bring up problems regardless of price tags? Or is it better at this time right now to forge solutions? You have a limited amount of time and a limited amount of staff and opportunities. And so is it most helpful right now, my question would be for the Director Gibbs here, to us to bring what needs to be done regardless of price tag? Or would it be to bring up things that we can implement right now or have a low price tag involved with them? I'm kind of getting mixed signals here. What's most valuable to you? Because that's our purpose in being here in the first place anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I know that later on the agenda we're gonna get an update on the Mountain Pine Beetle Task Force after Dan West gives us a briefing on kind of the landscape that we see. And with that task force, we're looking at, short, medium, and long-term approaches. And I see, we could recommend, I'd recommend, look at all the above, frankly, what administrative things, what legislative, what budget. Um, and I don't think we should necessarily shy away from like similar to like what Vaughn said, the big price tag stuff of like, what does it really cost to have us really make a dent in the challenge? But as a former legislator, as you know, like I think about too, like what's realistic. It's one thing to introduce a bill that's like a statement bill that says, hey, this is the problem, this is what we need. It's another bill that has reality to get passed. Every bill is the same in terms of the equality on or the equity that every bill will have a hearing and a fair hearing, but not every bill moves on to the next level and stands a chance of having the governor sign it too. So I think we could look at all the above, frankly.
Thanks everyone for your input in this conversation. When I send out the survey or the poll related to the legislative themes, I'm going to add a section about this too, so you all can keep giving us your thoughts and input. We are eating a little bit into Dan West's time, and so I want to close this conversation, and it's not closed for good, and we actually got a lot of really good perspectives, and I appreciated everyone's involvement in that conversation. So we'll keep pulling that together and come back at the next meeting with more information and ideas too.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Courtney, and Allison and others that helped, facilitate this conversation. I think it was really great. Let's see. Next, we're really excited to have Dan West, our state entomologist. Dan works for Matt and Christina at the State Forest Service. I've known Dan for I don't know how many years, a long time, but we are so lucky to have you and your expertise in the state of Colorado. He was there for the initial rollout with the governor on the new task force, and you really just do an amazing job of like having people understand the complexity and the issues, because I know it's so scientific and challenging, but we just really appreciate your leadership and thanks for joining us today. So the floor is yours.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks everybody for, well, overly kind comments, but hey, thanks. Hopefully we can boil some of this down today, and let me just make sure that I'm sharing my screen and everybody can see. I apologize to some of you that might have seen portions of this talk. Hopefully you'll be able to see. Let's see, it looks like some of that's cut off a little bit. There we go. Let me know if you're not seeing that. You guys have disappeared on me for somewhere, so I'm just going to keep going. And if somebody's got comments, please just feel free to chime in and let me know how it all goes as we're going. So yeah, so let's talk a little bit about mountain pine beetle along the Front Range, right? So those of us with some gray hair, right? We've been through this a little bit in the past, and let's just talk about where we were, right? So from 1996 through about 2012, maybe arguably 2013, we could, see that, roughly, I'll put this up here, roughly about 80% of our ponderosa pine forests were affected. And in part, largely, this was in higher elevation lodgepole pine forests, predominantly on public lands, mostly where, it was kind of a little bit less of a visual impact and ownership impact. If you look at the inset there, you can kind of see from 2020 through 2025, what we've recently been detecting from the air. And again, this is data that was collected collaboratively with our friends over at the U.S. Forest Service and the Aerial Detection Survey Program. But so these are people looking out the plane, seeing what's on the landscape. You can see what's out there, right? The last few years, right? A couple thousand acres, almost every single year we've been increasing. And the difference between this is that, the inset, most of what we've been seeing lately is along the Front Range in mostly dominated ponderosa pine stands. And I'll get into that here in a little bit. Let's talk about what that looks like, right? I, again, always like to look back and see what it was like and how we got here. And so if we look at this map and kind of look at your screen, right? The dark green areas are ponderosa pine forest depicted from land fire. The lighter green is lodgepole pine. And then again, the red areas is where we're seeing or where we picked up mountain pine beetle from this past year. I'll point out that there's a couple areas over by Gunnison that it's still largely in lodgepole, and there's a couple of areas up there by Buena Vista that is largely in limber pine, but mostly what we're seeing along the Front Range almost exclusively is in ponderosa pine forests. So let's zoom in a little bit closer, right, along that Front Range. What are we looking at? So you can kind of see predominantly those low elevation, multi-use, high WUI locations that are up and down the Front Range. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but you can kind of see that we're talking in these high traffic corridors, 285, I-70, and the high value areas that are just outside of Boulder, Denver, and of course, some of that stretches all the way down to almost Colorado Springs. If we just look at what does it look like on the landscape, right? These are images that I took in September. And so you can kind of see at the heart, the center of this image is the gray standing there. That's ponderosa pine that really died in 2024. Then the red that you're seeing there, of course, was standing red this past September. It was infested in the previous year. And then, that's I-70 on your left hand there, as you can see. And then this is just outside of El Rancho, so not too far from Evergreen right here. If we turn the camera a little further to the north, this gives us an idea of just what we were experiencing last fall. And you can see, right, we're starting to get this coalesce of just small pockets. Now we're getting into the much larger 50s and 100, if not more, whole entire hillsides are starting to turn red, and we're starting to see the impact of mountain pine beetle caused mortality. This is not atypical. This image that you're seeing on your screen, this is again in that Soda Creek subdivision, which is just outside of Evergreen. But for every red tree that you see right there on the landscape, I surveyed a lot of these stands. It's anywhere between 2.5 and 10 green infested trees that will turn red this upcoming summer. So again, not only is the intensity going to increase, but the footprint we anticipate is going to increase as well. If we kind of say, okay, well, now that we know that we've got some problems and we've seen what it looks like, what does it look like if we consider, again, this is the map of where we see it today. These are the aerially detected polygons. If we apply, okay, well, mountain pine beetle can fly up to 1 kilometer, about a half mile every single year. What does that look like, and where are we likely to see some activity? This by no means that every tree on every acre underneath these red polygons is going to be infested. It really just gives us a window of where are we likely to see some activity in the future. And then there's a paper out there that shows that some of these Dendroctonus species can fly all the way up to 2.5 kilometers or 1.5 miles. And so when we apply that and then clip it to the ponderosa pine type layer, we can see, okay, here's maybe in the next, we don't have a rate of spread, but maybe in the next few years, we could anticipate that perhaps these are the areas that we're likely to see some activity moving forward. So again, our partners over at the U.S. Forest Service, they've produced a similar map which just corroborates those distances, and they've put a rate of spread on there of every year. But I think by and large, the consensus is that we are going to continue to see activity along the Front Range in and around these areas that we already know there's activity. And so when are we going to see it, right? So we've been trapping along the Front Range. I just pulled out a few trap locations that we've been using over the last few years, in Jefferson, Clear Creek, Gilpin County, all the way down into the Black Forest, down in El Paso County. But nonetheless, I was trying to get site-specific data on when flight times are occurring. The window that we're going to see the bulk of mountain pine beetle out is really all the way through August and into about halfway through September. The lower figure is more lodgepole pine type, which is over by Gunnison, is where we've been trapping a lot of that. And you can see it slightly earlier. Maybe we would say early July through about August for lodgepole pine. But the bulk of what we're seeing is we anticipate to see new activity occurring for most of July and August is really when we're going to see the bulk of it. And so this is a really busy map, but I just kind of wanted to say that, I turned to the Forest Inventory and Analysis Program that the State Forest Service cooperates in as well across Colorado and said, well, where do we got plots relative to ponderosa pine and how much ponderosa pine is out there? And so this gives us an idea of where that data is coming from. These are intensive plots that people are recording the tree data and all the stand mensuration data that's out there. And if we apply that a little bit further to where we're seeing ponderosa pine type and mountain pine beetle type, we can pull out some of those plots and try to figure out, well, how much volume is out there and how much are we likely to see should this thing continue on. Again, another busy slide, but this just, gives us an idea of, well, this is how much ponderosa pine forest is out there by county and where we're likely to see more activity, right? Just based on the percentage of ponderosa pine. And some things that really draw out, right? Jefferson County, Boulder County, Larimer County, El Paso County. Again, all of these that are sitting, somewhere between a quarter and a third of all of their forests are ponderosa pine forests. And then if we drill down a little bit further, this color scheme drives me crazy, but nonetheless, you can kind of see that within those ponderosa pine forests, what's the species distribution and how much of that volume is sitting out there in ponderosa pine? And you can see a whole lot of volume. Across all of our counties, you can see that predominantly in those ponderosa pine types, it's mostly all ponderosa. It's not just split 50-50. So this just tells us there's a whole lot of ponderosa pine that's up and down that front range. And then if we take it even one step finer and say, okay, well, so what if it's ponderosa pine? Mountain pine beetle does not prefer small diameter trees. And so let's look at the diameter classes and try to figure out across these 9 counties that are affected up and down the front range, what do the diameter classes look like? And you can start to see here, right? I've broken them out in 6-inch diameter classes, but maybe we would argue that the smaller diameters are less susceptible or will likely be less affected by mountain pine beetle. That doesn't mean entirely, but by and large, they prefer these larger diameter trees. And so the gist of this story across all 9 counties, as you can see, is that the bulk of the material is sitting in these larger diameter classes, means we're likely to see a lot more activity as we move forward in those in each one of these counties. And then if we just take it one step further, we can show that, again, just looking at the ponderosa pine type, this is across the diameter classes. And again, some things really stand out, right? Jefferson County, some of these counties that have a high proportion of larger diameter ponderosa pine, I'm worried about. And so if we bring it all together and say, okay, in aggregate, what do we got out there, right? Across all 9 counties, there's more than 50% of the ponderosa pine trees that are out there are in these larger diameter categories. We're likely to see some activity, of course, and you can see the trees per acre listed there. We're, well approaching more than 70 trees per acre in these larger diameter classes. And of course, the volume is that much greater. So, so what do we do with it all, right? And so at the State Forest Service here, we've been working with some of these sort yards and recycling centers and drop-off locations to try to figure out where can people start to take some of this wood so that we can responsibly deal with it, right? And so we're just producing a hot log map where people can drop off their hot logs if they need. And each one of those you can click on and it'll give you some details about, what's there and restrictions and all that. And then lastly, what have we been doing at the state, right? We've been really beefing up some of our education tools out there. The Mountain Pine Beetle webpage on our State Forest Service website is constantly in revamping. And so we're adding new information in there as well as options for landowners and stuff in there. And then the bulk of where we're going to be dumping a lot of this information as well as in that Live Wildfire Ready campaign. And so I think with that, maybe I'll turn it over and stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Matt and let Matt kind of describe a little bit and yield some of my time to Matt.
Yeah, you did a good job as usual. We're exceptionally lucky to have Dr. West in this role at this unique time. Obviously this is not our first rodeo, but normally we've done this presentation a handful of times in a lot of different settings and we kind of set it up around those parameters. I think what's important to take home for folks to acknowledge is that there's this initial phase, right? And then we're gonna kind of experience the growth. And we're going to sort of experience the growth and awareness and some of the concerns. The public's pretty activated to some degree based on a lot of the outreach and the governor's, in response to the governor's agenda on how we respond. But one of the things that I just wanted to highlight is I keep saying in all these settings, people are like, well, what could drive this or what could make this worse? And we consistently said a warm, dry winter followed by a warm, dry spring. Well, the warm, dry winter is here, and it's not just like a little bit here, it's here in really unprecedented conditions. we could get a bailout, right? We like that 2013 deluge kind of gave us a reprieve, but it's really unlikely. And so I think for the purposes for this task force, or excuse me, for the council here in relation to the work of the task force will be doing, which we'll talk about here in momentarily, is that it's really thinking about what are those immediate steps, what are those interim steps, and then the really long-term steps. And the messaging that I've been providing, and Dan, we were on the stage together at Water Congress the other day, and certainly a lot of other settings I've been trying to describe, and I want to put forward to this group, is that there's really two opportunities here. One is to do really, really well working across sectors and bringing all the resources together from federal, state to local and down to the community scale, and responding in a thoughtful way, and demonstrating as Coloradans we know how to adapt and we know how to take on these challenges together. We've done it before, we'll do it again. But beyond that, it's this other frame, which is around the cultural shift that needs to occur, and that's, how did we get here? Right? Let's try to understand that. And then more importantly, how do we ensure that we can, to the extent that we can raise the resources and stay dedicated to the effort, never allow these types of conditions to foment again. So there's a huge opportunity to message Coloradans that how critical it is to manage the landscape. In the absence of the natural disturbance regimes that maintain the heterogeneity and all of the different things that we know are in age class diversity that we know are necessary to allow forests to remain resistant and to these challenges. In the absence of those, primarily fire, we're going to have to find ways to engage with the landscape, in particular in these places where people have settled and established communities, and where we've established significant amounts of infrastructure that the average everyday Coloradans depend on in lots of ways they understand, in lots of ways they don't understand. So I pose that challenge to this group that not only are we going to take on this issue and respond forcefully and thoughtfully and really in a sustained and hopefully decadal effort, but beyond that, what's the cultural shift that we could foment? And what are the ways that we could change the way we see our relationship with the woods that would cause us to get into a sustained rhythm of action and stay there? So those were just some other thoughts I wanted to provide to the team. And then I don't know where we're going from here, Allison. Maybe we'll pivot to or Courtney pivot beyond after I get into some questions. Maybe I guess we'll pivot to the task force, but I wasn't totally sure.
Yeah, no, thanks, Matt, and thank you, Dan. I think right now we'd just love to know if anybody has any questions on Dan's presentation, but also, so Amy, we'll take your question, and then I want to pass it to Todd Neal too at the U.S. Forest Service. We're so lucky to have so many amazing foresters and entomologists in this room right now. So I'll start with Amy, and then we'll go to Todd.
Thanks, Allison, and thank you, Dan. My name is Amy Moyer. I work at the Colorado River District based on the West Slope. So this was the first time I had the opportunity to see your slide. So thank you for the presentation. I had two follow-up questions. One, I think it was the Aspen Times had an article referencing some scientific debate on interventions, and I'm just curious to hear your response and your expert opinion on that. And then secondly, you had mentioned some of the heightened activity in Gunnison County, and I'm curious what the planned interventions might be for that area. That's a bit of a different situation that it appears than what's going on in some of the Front Range counties.
Yeah, I'll just take a stab at both of those, and then I'll let Matt or Todd or anybody else chime in on some of the fire stuff. But thinking on some of the debate in the media is, the underpinnings is all, relatively the same, right? We want to focus on that home ignition zone, and we want to focus on the infrastructure and egress. And some of that is, obviously point on. And, a lot of that article was looking for a splash, right? And I'll let the governor's office kind of chime in on what they want to say about it. But, by and large, we have excluded fire from a lot of our landscapes, and the fuel component just continues to get bigger and bigger. And so unless we have some kind of an intervention, there needs to be some kind of a reduction in that fuel load. Otherwise, we all understand that when a fire should go, we could just, debate the fire behavior, but should a fire take off, we all know that that fire effects are going to be that much greater. So I'll leave it at that. And then, well, Matt, do you want to chime in on anything? I see you smiling and kind of thinking about maybe.
Well, I mean, I think it's a really appreciate bringing it up, Amy, because we're gonna, I think I think it was Beatlemania, right, which I really appreciate. That was a catchy mechanism to sort of frame, and we've been wrestling certainly not just in relation to the mountain pine beetle outbreak and our response, but we've been wrestling with the same sort of detractors in a lot of the wildfire risk reduction and wildfire mitigation forest health work that's been going on across counties, all across the Front Range. And in particular, this really flashpoint was in Jefferson County. And so, we've been having this discussion, and I guess I would try to pose it in the most simple of terms, which is there are certain instances, certainly under certain conditions, where forest thinning could potentially accelerate, right? There is some very preliminary science that's suggested that you could accelerate the fire behavior in those unique instances. And I'm like, all right, fair enough. But what the article also comes to a conclusion is that, that nature has a way of sort of resetting and engaging in when these conditions are out of whack and restoring balance. And I wouldn't disagree. But in the era of climate change, that's essentially mega fire, under these conditions. And I guess, we should be very thoughtful about what is the trick, what is that alternative? If it's just home hardening and creating defensible space and letting the system reset itself, we know that in these areas in particular where we have all these people where we've established, long-standing communities and billions of dollars of infrastructure, that's not a viable option. And the other thing that we know is there's a huge body of evidence that is concretely rooted in science that demonstrates the efficacy of traditional and conventional forest management, reducing competition, selecting for, genetics, creating diversity in age class and species. Like all of these things create the resistance and the resilience to the pressures that we know are coming, and can get super nuanced really quick. But what we don't want to do is get in sort of a tit for tat sort of trading science. What I explain to communities when I engage on this topic is that, look, our job is to achieve stewardship of Colorado's forests here at the State Forest Service, regardless of jurisdiction, however we can help. And in these places where this sizable fuel load is going to be created, right? Because we saw that with the lodgepole. There was this original flash of increased flammability with red needles in the trees. That is transitory and very quick. When the needles hit the ground, before the snow, they have a limited capacity to carry fuel, to carry fire at a more accelerated rate on the ground. Now, beyond that, with the standing dead, the fire severity potential does start to decrease rather dramatically, depending on the additional fuel loading that exists on the ground. It's in about 7 to 10 years is when those large heavies start to fall and collapse under wind and a variety of other pressures that you get that ground-based heavy fuel loading that was the exact conditions that led to the East troublesome and Cameron Peak fires and other fires that we've seen, large growth with huge intensities. So really it's that long-term fuel profile that we're trying to arrest. And then also where we're not successful, where fire makes it there first, getting ready for reforestation and recovery and ensuring that the forest type and the forest condition that we want to establish is established and maintained. But it's a little bit more nuanced than, and I think the pitch of the article was that you're trying to scare everybody with the red needles. And we're like, well, I mean, if we have a bunch of trees that die this year, which we will dramatically under an extreme drought year, those red needles for a period of time are going to be super effective at carrying canopy fire for that August to November timeframe. And that is when we have huge fires. And so there will be a small but peak increase in flammability in those canopies. But that's just 2026, and then we're going to see more mortality in out years in each. But really, when you think about the interim and long game, it's that long-term fuel loading of those landscapes when those ponderosa systems collapse in on each other. And Pondo comes down quicker than Lodgepole, so that will accelerate. It won't take 20 years. Theoretically, this is all, again, we're going to get to experience this all together in real time. But our goal is how much of that resource can you get out of the landscape to create the conditions to undermine the potential for mega fire or to reduce the severity. So I went off on a little tangent there, but I'm also practicing because I'm going to get this question in a lot of different forms, in a lot of different ways. And I'm going to try to do it in less than 7.5 minutes. But the key here is that, we anticipate that debate will continue. And we want to just be really transparent about what we're actually trying to achieve. And I want this council to be certainly on the same page as well. And I want folks to poke holes and ask hard questions because we don't want to oversell the severity of the threat, but we don't want to undersell the alternative, which is devastating. And just for really quick for fun on the Gummy, yeah, that's like the last 350,000 acres of undisturbed lodgepole that for whatever reason didn't get nuked in the last outbreak. We made a hard run of the Taylor Canyon to hold it back with a bunch of investments and targeted treatments, but because of the severity of the outbreak and this unbelievable amount of opportunity for the beetles, we expect, and this was my previous role, that the majority of that lodgepole in the Taylor Park area is probably going to succumb. And how I think in that instance, you have to sort of pivot to the Forest Service and think how many resources they can bring together to augment some of the change conditions they'll experience. Luckily, there's some fantastic NEPA up there in the Taylor Park that is designed to address these issues. I know a really smart, capable ranger that helped facilitate that back in the day.
Thanks, Matt. I want to turn it to Todd really quick. So, or you do not have to be quick, but please.
I'm generally quick. Thank you, Allison. Hey, Matt, I really appreciate that you and Dan are practicing because I think one of the things that should be a takeaway for all of us, if you go back to some of what Dan offered in his presentation, is for those who have been through it before, the timeline and the scale of this, it's going to get ugly over the next 5 to 10 years. And it will be a day-to-day need to communicate with the public and interest from the public around what's going on, what we're doing, what can be done. And I think, we're thinking about a lot of the same things, being able to try and communicate accurately as much as possible what we anticipate maybe some of the worst case scenarios could be around this and what folks can lean into, in their communities, around their homes that may help. I think I'm also hoping we can really lean into making sure folks have the right expectation around outcomes and that we continue to have this conversation around what this means, right, on the landscape in Colorado to see beetle activity at this scope and scale and density, and the opportunity that creates for us to have a real conversation about, large scale, landscape scale, stewardship based forestry that Colorado will need to engage in so that in the future, we're a state with resilient forest ecosystems and really leaning to that opportunity as we move forward to, think outside of what we have done in the sense of traditional forestry versus what we need to do right now, which is at a scope and scale that exceeds in many places what we can do through traditional forest practices. So that's my hope. And I'm glad that you're both practicing because we're practicing as well.
Yeah, real quick, Ali, just so I'm going to respond. I mean, the other piece to that article is that there's the suggestive nature of this unholy alliance between like the timber industry and foresters, right? And I would just offer to this group in particular that I wish only could there be such a robust timber industry that I could be deeply aligned in the tank with it. But that's not the case. Colorado will never be a timber producing state, but we're always going to be a stewardship state. And really, the way I've been trying to posit this to folks is that like you can suppress fire, or suppress management, but don't suppress both. Because if you do, you're going to create the conditions for a mass wasting and a mass reset. And again, if you think about things like over 400 years, yeah, the forest would recover with like birds and wind. But like there's 1 million Coloradans living intermixed with these landscapes and another 3 million of them, in addition to 40 million Americans that are deeply dependent on these landscapes for a variety of other ecological productivity. And so we have a duty to interact and a duty to act, and to do so in a way that leaves things better than we found them. And if we can attract utilization capacity for this low value fiber that it's of the scale and in quantity that we should be trying to create, then man, that's just a cost per acre reducer, and maybe having some other potential economic benefits as well. But they'll never, like Colorado will never be a Pacific Northwest or a Southeastern United States where there is and has been, or maybe not is, but there certainly has been some tension between sort of feeding long-term industry. Now, that being said, we do have some limited utilization capacity in this state, and we're doing everything we possibly can to ensure that they remain viable because, again, they play this incredible role as a cost per acre reducer, especially like in the Taylor Basin. The cost of those treatments to reduce and substantially impact the nature of those lodgepole stands is substantially offset by the fact that a great deal of it could be hauled out to the Montrose Forest Products and put to good use, participate as carbon capture and a variety of other good things. And so the alternative would be to just pile it, burn it, or find other ways to dispose of it. And that's another piece. Those nuances are critically important. But the long-term objective should be to get into a rhythm of interaction with the landscape to ensure that it remains viable for all the things that we depend on as people. And then, of course, be cognizant and aware of all of the other entities that depend on a healthy and functioning forest as well. But really, all of that begins, habitat, recreation, water supply, everything else, that all begins and ends with the forest functioning and capable of being resilient in the face of all the stressors that we know not are coming, but that are here.
Mark, I didn't want to cut you off. Did you have a thought?
Yes, this is really heartening to me, not because it's a very dire prognosis, but I think it's an accurate one. And I think we're dealing in reality right now. And one of the concerns here that I had, the product that's going to come off here, as Director McCombs brought up very accurately, is an even lower value product than we dealt with the last bug outbreak. We had a lot better chance for economic development with lodgepole and spruce than we have had. And this front range ponderosa pine is going to be a very low value product. And so I think that's why I've come back to this constant drumbeat of manipulation and how much of this do we have to haul off, because let's try to put it in a form where we don't take any more than we can help. And I think the presentation today I'm really heartened by the fact that you're looking at the long-term end of this, because the whole goal here is we've got this. The real game is it never happens again, or that we're ahead of the game. And I really feel good about the outlook that you're taking. I'm not really interested, and I don't think industry is interested in chasing dead trees around the forest again. It doesn't work. It isn't going to work. It's going to disappoint everybody. And I think the point you brought up is that, and Director McCombs as well, this continuous educational part to the public, where we don't oversell it, we don't undersell it, but they realize what's coming and get their mind right, because it is truly inevitable. And it's going to be, this time, it's going to be in the most visible places and the most, basically, it's going to be right in their face this time. And so, and there's huge infrastructure there, and protecting that infrastructure. This is a case where we can't let nature take its way, because it's going to be unacceptable to the public. So I really am appreciative of your efforts and your recognition of this time. I think that's really important. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I see this. Jody, you're asking for the slides. Of course, I'll make everything available to you guys. I'll click them off for you.
Great, Dan. Thanks so much for your presentation. We really appreciate your involvement and your expertise on this. And yeah, we hope to have you back at a future meeting for sure.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, now that we're aware of the landscape in front of us, I want to share with you, and many of you were already attending the rollout on December 15th with the governor on the new executive order outlining the establishment of the Ponderosa Mountain Pine Beetle Task Force. really want to thank everyone for being there, especially the co-chairs, Matt McCombs and Mike Morgan. But it was just really amazing to look to see all the different partners, and so many of you were there helping to kick off this process. So the task force appointments are more or less, most of them have been finalized. We're working on a press release. The co-chairs are planning to hire a facilitator, and we're working on the draft preliminary report that structure needs to be done by March 1st. We expect the first task force meeting to be in April. And so it's really pretty tight timelines that we all really need to get around. Allison, thank you for helping to facilitate kind of what the co-chairs really need to do and all the different measurables and the timeframes that we need to produce results by. Let's see, Matt, anything you want to add on that, or Allison on the task force? Anything that I missed?
No, just it's coming together. And again, let me echo how hard Allison's been working on to pull this together in such a very short amount of time amidst everything else that she does. She's just done a fantastic job. So thank you to your team, Dan.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot. Definitely a lot of moving parts, and we are still finalizing a couple different spots, I think, on the task force, but we're really close to finalizing who'll be able to participate in that. Allison, yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just add something, these meetings are going to be open meetings, just like any other, state-led task force. And we'll be standing up a website here really soon too. So, most meetings we might start with in-person meetings, but we know it's hard to continue that type of cadence. So there will be virtual meetings. And just stay tuned, because in the next couple weeks, there'll just be a lot of things that we'll be able to share as far as appointments, as far as that exact meeting date. And then really just like the preliminary work plan that we're going to be putting forth too. And then not to forget too, I'll drop the executive order in the chat, but there is a, connection to this council, to the fire commission, and that's going to be a big thing that we're hopefully going to be discussing right there at the beginning, is how we blend together with the commissions and councils that we already have, as well as the other efforts that are already going on across the state. There's a number of items on the executive order that this task force is supposed to look at. I believe it's A to O, so that's more than half the alphabet, I think, if I can get that off like in my head real quick. And so it's a lot of things to take on. And so we're also looking deeply at that list and just tying to existing processes and plans that are in place, and then identifying the gaps as well. What's not being taken care of yet. So just more to come, and appreciate you all. And thanks for sticking to us. It's interesting with such a tight timeline. In some ways, I feel like it moves slow sometimes too, but it's been moving very fast. Thank you all.
Hey, Dan, real quick, I just want to dovetail a tiny like that. What's really cool about this is that one of the silly jokes I made when we were sort of briefing the God was like, we're getting the band back together, right? We're on a mission from God, which is that's a Blues Brothers reference for those of you who don't know. But the key here is that there's a lot of expertise, and if you look at all those different deliverables associated with the EO, there's a lot of entities that are already sort of driving a lot of that those concepts and stuff. So I just think just to acknowledge that nobody thinks that there is an enormous body of effort and body of and lots of other entities that have some really good contributions. And I look forward to the task force ensuring that we be incorporative of all of that existing knowledge. And then, try to push, like Allison said, try to push forward those places where we have gaps. So just really excited to try to, at least from my approach, from the leadership I'll be able to provide. And I'm confident that Mike and Dan feel similarly, is that be as inclusive and incorporative of all of those entities through the represented, because as I was going through with our the facilitator and thinking through, there's just like a lot of bandwidth already in the system in the state to take on a lot of these hard issues. And I'm hoping that this effort or excuse me, the stimuli, right? The outbreak and the logical or ponderosa stance is going to just be that opportunity for us as a state to take forward a lot of these things. And one of the things we didn't talk about was about creating opportunities for more prescribed fire. We were talking about that earlier, that like as through all this management and interaction with the landscape, we're going to slowly build out the architecture to start bringing that critical but missing tool at scale to bear. And so that's very exciting as well, because we know it's the most efficient and effective way to get these forests back into a condition where they can remain vibrant in the face of a lot of challenges coming down the road.
Great. Thanks, Matt.
And
Allison?
I just want to add one more thing. I'm going to put a link in the chat. So next week, the Center for Collaborative Conservation, the Forest Collaboratives Network, is going to host a branching out session. I don't see Katie McNovak on our meeting yet anymore, but she was here earlier. And so that's going to be a branching out session with Director Gibbs, Director McCombs, and Director Morgan about the task force. So I'm going to put the link if you're not signed up, or if you want to share it along with your other with your groups or your partners that would be invited.
Awesome. Thanks, Allison. Great. Let's move on. I know we have about 30 minutes left, and I want to make sure we have enough time for the roundtable updates. So this is an opportunity for anyone to kind of chime in on updates that they're working on that everyone should be aware of. And in no particular order, I can just start calling on folks, but always look forward to this part too, on just kind of hearing what everyone's working on. So with that, you can raise your hand or just take yourself off mute, and we can do some updates.
Yeah, I'll just pop off real quick. One of the most exciting things that's happened in State Forest Service is that we were able to hire a nursery manager. Laura Miller is her name. And I offer this because like we tried this a couple times. It's hard to find someone with a unique skill set to take on a multi-million-dollar operation to the scale. And so we're just extremely excited to bring on that capacity and just know that we're still kind of on track to have sort of a soft completion here early summer this year. And so perhaps we can host one of these meetings going forward in the future, and we can have a small christening of the nursery with this group. But that was an exciting update that we have that capacity in place, and look forward for those that have interest or the opportunity to meet Laura when she's got her feet underneath her here as the project continues to move forward. Thanks.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Matt. Okay, other updates.
I'll go. This is Veronica Medina, Archuleta County. We just completed our update to our Archuleta County Community Wildfire Protection Plan, which is, we've already got some grants that we're going to be able to apply for to help us do some fire mitigation, not only on public lands, but private lands. So we've got a group of people that are looking at doing that. But it was a community pool that we were able to do this update. So that was really exciting. And we've approved it through the BOCC and all the other entities. So it's a win-win, because as we've all said today, the drought that we're experiencing is just going to get worse. So let's hope not, but that's what the outcome may be. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Commissioner. Okay, next updates. Who has an update? I know others do. Mark, Amy. Yeah, Amy. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, it's a way to go. I'm happy to, Dan, but I'll give some sobering and difficult news of just, we've mentioned, Commissioner Medina mentioned the drought. It's been mentioned throughout the course of this discussion, and certainly something that this council will continue to pay attention to. Certainly folks are really looking at how does this compare to previous years? And the Colorado Climate Center, I was just going to share a quote from some of their research. So this is the warmest start to a water year we've ever seen, combined with the lack of snowstorms we typically see in the winter, has brought us to the worst midwinter mountain snowpack in decades. So certainly as you look out your window, we're all living this, but just wanted to provide that update, and certainly something that we're paying close attention to in the water space. And as we know, the forest health space, the water quality, the water supply space are so rapidly becoming intertwined that staring into the fire season, looking at long-term impacts to forest health and long-term impacts to water supply will be at the forefront of all of our minds.
Yeah. Thank you, Amy. Madeline.
Yeah, thanks, Director Gibbs. If you want some real negative news, talk to the water utilities right now. I think we're all very, very concerned with this year. In addition to what Amy mentioned, Denver Water just released some news that our South Platte watershed, which about half of our water supply has come from, is the worst on record, not just in decades, which is where our Colorado River supply is from, but our South Platte watershed, which is where we've seen some of our largest wildfires, in Denver Water's watershed as well, is the worst on record. So we're in a tough position for the summer. I'll share, the reason I raised my hand is share some good news though. Just reflecting on Water Congress a few weeks ago, and Director McCombs mentioned, him and Director Gibbs gave a great talk on mountain pine beetle. I'll share even before then, we had a fantastic 3-hour panel on forest health and wildfire, where we got the most attendance I think that I've seen for a session focused on forest or watersheds at Water Congress, and then more airtime for forests and watersheds in the plenary sessions of Water Congress than I've seen in my few years attending there. So great to see, I think, the water world's attention in this arena, and as we've said a few times just today, it'll take all of us. So that was some exciting, I think, progress to see it at Water Congress, in my opinion. Updates for Denver Water. We're still plugging away with our From Forest to Faucets partnership. We were able to get all of our partners together in a room with the regional office last week. Heard some great updates. I think the most exciting component to me is really marrying some of our, landscape scale forest management projects with some in-stream restoration projects that are happening in all corners of our watershed. Just got some photos of some more in-stream restoration projects that are happening in our South Platte watershed today, which is fantastic, along with some really large-scale forest management projects like the Rampart Range project. So amidst all the challenges, we certainly saw a lot of project delays last year from, uncertainty in the federal government and deferred, but activity is starting to pick up again, which we're really excited and proud of. That's it for me.
Awesome. Thanks, Madeline. Thanks so much. It was great to see you at Water Congress. It was great. Packed room for sure. Yeah. Okay, other updates. I'll give a couple updates. First of all, I shared just briefly with you all that the state and the BLM have signed this shared stewardship MOU that's been in the works for quite a few years now. So really great to have that completed and moving forward. Amy and Madeline mentioned some of the water challenges, and on top of that, compounded with our challenging snowpack, which I think many of you know, I live in Breckenridge, and I normally can tell a decent, like an average year is when we don't see the fence and the dog just like walks across because there's so much snow. And I wish I took some photos to share with you all, but now it's just like, a tiny little bit of snow around the house. And just thinking of the challenging year, I was catching up with our state engineer, Jason Ullman, and he said, yeah, right now the measurables are an inch less than previously was a terrible year, 2002. And some of you vividly remember 2002, and I remember in Summit County, like in the middle of summer, you look at Lake Dillon and it just looked like there were like islands everywhere because of the lack of snow. And of course, the Hayman fire was 2002. And then, 2003, there were all kinds of different bills that came out of Washington, D.C. To deal with all the challenges with wildfire season. So, February and March, as many of you know, tend to be Colorado's best months for snowpack. We're scheduled uh, to get about 9 inches of snow over the next few days, and it was trying to snow earlier today, but not quite snowing yet. Amy, I don't know if you're getting anything. No, yeah. And so let's really hope for snow. But anyways, Colorado River issues continue to be a real challenge, and the lack of snowpack continues to be something that all the different 7 basin states are grappling with. This Saturday, we're scheduled to come up with a 7 basin states recommendation. I had to run earlier today in the meeting because I had like the DNR director for California talking to me about what they're planning on doing and letters and so forth. And so just like there's so much going on behind the scenes, everyone's working hard to try to find a solution. Let's see, our Colorado Strategic Wildfire Action Program released its fourth round of our workforce development program in October. We awarded just over $7 million of funds, which is just absolutely amazing. So really happy with that. And then also the state's been working in coordination with a collection of military, nonprofit, and federal agency partners to establish a new Centennial Landscape designation that will encompass critical military kind of readiness lands in the greater Colorado Springs area. And so wildfire mitigation is definitely a big priority of this landscape. So if that comes to fruition, we'll be really focusing a lot of attention, in that particular area with this new Centennial Landscape designation. I'm trying to think. Yeah, there's just so much going on. We're really looking forward to getting the task force off the ground and getting this first meeting established, and really appreciate folks' willingness to participate for those that are willing to participate. So with that, let's see, any questions for me? Okay, let's move to, I don't know, I don't know if Roberta, Courtney, or Allison know if there's anyone from the general public here, because we do have a public comment opportunity for anyone to weigh in as well, but I just don't see anyone that's not really connected to this meeting normally. Is that accurate? I think that's accurate.
Folks who we have not promoted to panelists are watching as regular attendees, but I don't see anyone in the attendee waiting room who's asking to speak. If you would like to speak, please put something in the Q&A. So maybe we can just give it a second, but
Yeah.
no one's raising their hand. So go ahead, Dan.
Okay, great. Well, just let me know. And then also I just again really want to thank everyone's willingness to join. I always try to be really efficient for these meetings, and I think we'll finish up just a few minutes ahead of schedule, but the work that we do is extremely important, especially now, and I'm really just grateful for the time and expertise that you all bring to the table. We are coordinating with folks in Fort Collins to potentially host a spring meeting in person at CSU. So we will, I don't know if Matt or Christina or anyone has any updates on that, but I think we're working towards that. So hopefully that will work out.
Yeah, that's great. Happy to provide more information.
Okay, great. Awesome. And we'll get more information once we know more information on that. And then let's see, Courtney, did anyone from the general group want to testify? Okay. With that, then I think we're done. So again, I really appreciate everyone's time and expertise, and yeah, I'm just really grateful for your service and your willingness to serve on this really important committee, this task force and council. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of the day, and let's hope for snow, right?
Thank you.
Okay.